Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome you to the January 21st regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight, for a change, will be Ms. Skye Snellgrove, over here on my right. The question period sign-up sheet, which many of you are familiar with, is on the partition wall near the gallery. If during the meeting any member of the gallery has a question regarding an agenda item, please write down your name and the agenda item on the sheet. At the start of question period, I will call up those who have signed up to the podium to address Council. It was a sad commentary on past Council and Chamber and what took place in this Chamber that the Mayor would occasionally read out the Council meeting decorum sheet. I intend not to do that, but appreciating that there are passionate feelings in our community about a number of issues, I just want to say that notwithstanding my poor performance as chair last week in not holding people to time limits and allowing for clapping to take place, that is not the way future meetings will be conducted. I'm going to ask people when they come as delegations to the microphone that when it gets to the 4-minute mark and the light goes on, I will inform you have a minute left, and I will expect you to wrap up your comments after 5 minutes in total, which is what the procedure allows for. With respect to questions, I will caution people that at the end of the meeting, when you have the opportunity to ask questions of Council, they are indeed questions. They are not statements where you're searching your mind to try and find a question to ask Council. And that will make the meetings fair for everyone, and I think establish and reinforce the decorum that I believe this new Council has brought to proceedings in this city. So I appreciate every one of you attending tonight. I am always thrilled to see the outstanding democratic participation in the City of Nanaimo. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items. Ms. Snellgrove.
We're removing agenda item 7A, a reading from Tina Biello, Poet Laureate. Agenda item 14A, Councillor Armstrong, motion re nuisance properties. We're adding the following delegations with a 5-minute time limit: Terry Lee Wager, Trevor Heshka, Lynn Burrows, Ken Clark, Diane Brown, and Heather and Edward Ambo.
Thank you very much. A motion for the approval of the agenda is amended. Councillor Armstrong, seconded Councillor Hemmons. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Item 5, a motion for the adoption of the minutes is circulated.
So moved.
So moved. Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Bonner. All those in favour? And Ms. Snellgrove, properly speaking, do we need to specify that's for both minutes of the regular Council meeting and the special Council meeting? Understood. Thank you very much. With respect to the Mayor's report, I'm going to pass on some sad news that may not be known to many of you. On Sunday, January the 6th, former City Councillor Dawn Tyndall passed away after succumbing to a 7-week battle with pneumonia. Ms. Tyndall served as a Nanaimo City Councillor from 2002 to 2005. She will be remembered for her many contributions to her community, which are far too many to list, but would include her term as a City Councillor, her involvement on many local committees and boards, including being the president of the Nanaimo Oceanside Rotary Club, hosting a morning radio talk show. Ms. Tyndall was a talented woman who touched many lives and was an active part of her community. Our thoughts and condolences go out to her and her family and friends at this time. I'm not going to give any further report. We have a busy agenda on us for us tonight. There is Mr. Sims, who's going to talk to us under presentations, our Director of Engineering and Public Works, with respect to the city response to the rather dramatic windstorm on December 20th and 21st. Mr. Sims, thank you.
Thank you very kindly, Your Worship. It's a pleasure to be in front of you again this evening. It's just really a recap of what happened in the windstorm and a few of the lessons that we learned, and be pleased to take your questions as we get through it. So BC Hydro has entitled this as an unprecedented windstorm. It's the most severe they've seen. We have sort of an official sustained wind speeds of 80 kilometers an hour, but unofficial of over 120. So, and the thing that they found that made it the most challenging, of course, was the multiple directions that the wind was coming from, and lots of evidence of trees snapping off well above their roots as well as overturned. So the city activated its emergency response center or coordination center to support the response, because Sorry, I'm just hearing myself come in and out. But to support the response and to help coordinate hydro crews, RCMP, and fire and public works groups. So just a few pictures, and the presentation this evening is sort of littered with pictures. So some damage to Loudon Park, the Bevan Park pitch and putt. You can see an example there of the trees snapped off about 20 feet in the air. Biggs Road, which turned out to be closed for about 6 days due to the power lines and TELUS lines down. Parks were also closed as a precaution. And am I still on, Mike? Yeah, okay. It just keeps fading in and out. So parks were closed as a precaution for safety of the public because of numerous trees down on lots of poles. Our public works sanitary sewer crews were running around from sewer pump station to sewer pump station, keeping them active because they were out of power. So they have a portable generator that they have to keep each one running. So the trampoline, the public works sewer crew was standing right adjacent to, that's a lift station at the bottom of Piper's Crescent. They had moved away from it and the trampoline dropped right where they were standing. So that was a bit concerning for them. And it was just a really sudden reaction. And Protection Island, the picture on the right, was, of course, without power and access for many, many days. Another shot of Biggs Road, just kind of indicating the extent of the downed lines. That was one of the most challenging ones. And during we had mapping staff in the Emergency Coordination Center cranking out maps almost on an hourly basis as information was being updated. And this was just one map that was cranked. I think this one shows about 11 road closures around the city. So this is, I'm cheating a little bit here. This is, a couple of trees that dropped from city property or city parks onto homes or cars. But this was actually the week before. If you remember, January the 14th or December the 14th, we had a similar windstorm, not nearly as severe. And of course, one of the biggest challenges we had was with the water treatment plant. So the plant was running on a generator power, and it failed, and that sort of triggered a bit of a cascade effect on some of the sensitive instrumentation. So the culprit turned out to be the communications block in the lower right. And that little communications block, fortunately we had a spare, knocked out, or interrupted, let me say that way, it interrupted the ability of the plant to produce water. So we were sort of fighting that on two fronts. One of them was, the operations crew running the plant manually in a limited capacity, trying to keep up, and the other one was trying to troubleshoot the problem. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but with some great support from Nanaimo Forest Products, actually one of their experts from the Harmac pulp mill, we had some additional help, and that we were able to restore function within 36 hours. The public, in responding to the do not use, which was kind of practice extreme conservation, was on a great sacrifice for many in the public and indeed some businesses. But it really succeeded in knocking back the consumption, and that enabled the operators some time and space to catch up to the capacity again. Just one of the things that, we'll talk a little bit about communication, but one of the things that to point out is that the water was always safe to drink through the entire operation. There was some concern that it was a boil water order. That was not actually the case. So I'll give credit to the Nanaimo Bulletin for this shot. I stole it from the internet, but it's still a really good indication. This was Nanaimo River Road, which is the power feed to the water treatment plant. And in response to our call, they scrambled 6 crews to get out there and to try and restore power. The thinking was if we could get power back to the plant, so that would allow a complete reset and maybe things would function normally. That turned out not to be the case, in fact, but we still appreciate the hydro getting out there because that enabled the plant to have heat once again. So the other piece of this was that all of the responders, Public Works received over 1,600 calls on the Friday. That's unprecedented number. That's about 6 times our normal daily call volume. Similar to Firecom, 3 times. The switchboard at City Hall is similar numbers. And as I mentioned, we've activated the city's emergency response center or coordination center to do this. One of the things that was well received by the public was we recognized that a number of people were without power for multiple days. We activated a warming center at Bevan Park, pardon me, and that allowed people to sort of come in and get warm, charge their phones, and just have a little bit of social. That was with the emergency services volunteers. So one of the things that we're doing, another shot of Nanaimo River Road and the number of crews, one of the things that we're doing is just reviewing our response. How did we do on sort of all levels, not only the operational levels at each fire department, Parks and Recreation, Public Works, but as the Emergency Coordination Center, how did that work? What were the successes there? So some of the key lessons, of course, are that communicate early, communicate often, and clarity of message is a big one. And one of the things that we learned was, pushing that emergency call alert out before all of the other city media platforms and switchboards were ready to receive those messages, kind of overwhelmed them a little bit. So that was a good lesson. Reaching out to others for support, like the example of the Harmac engineers that came and supported us, that was really valuable. Same with BC Hydro, Shaw, TELUS, we're all supportive. So here's kind of a listing of some of the things that we're looking at in a little bit more depth. Excuse me. So we go back and look at our emergency response plans. How did they behave? Do they need updating? What did we learn? So reviewing the emergency call alert system was kind of necessitated. I believe council saw an email there that said this looked like a scam call. So it's an unknown number. You're being asked to press 1 to acknowledge that you've received it. All of the things that the RCMP and others are warning you against doing when you're answering a phone. So we're seeing how we can perhaps address that. So some of the things that are already in play are the climate resilience studies. Those are ongoing. Reserve policies, that we make sure we have enough emergency funding. You've heard Ms. Fulla and Ms. Mercer talk about that. And coincidentally, Public Safety Canada was coming to do a resilience assessment of our water treatment plant. So they did that last week, or the week before, I should say. And that'll be a good tool to use to ask ourselves questions. And then as I mentioned, we're going to do a full-on Emergency Coordination Center review, looking at sort of all of the avenues and how did it work. So this, I think, long list of thanks, and this is only a partial list, people that we don't know. The media were quite good in getting the word out for all of the challenges that we were seeing. Certainly the patience shown by residents and business, and the understanding that they showed this support in helping reduce water and find their way around the city with many traffic lights out was good. Lots of evidence of neighbors helping neighbors, elderly people being housed in warmer homes. And as I say, BC Hydro responded so well to this event. It's unprecedented. I think 900 personnel sort of focused on the island was the logistics of moving that many people and that much equipment is just staggering. RCMP and Island Health, and I mentioned Nanaimo Forest Products. Starbucks, I know the Buzz Coffee House and Bold Night were a couple of other ones that were helping to feed crews as well. So as I say, I don't know everyone that helped, but the evidence was there. So this is a good opportunity to make a plug for the city's emergency management information. On the city's website, nanaimo.ca, type in emergency management, and it's lots of links, lots of resources. The good opportunity to update or sign up for the emergency call alert system. We certainly heard a lot of, hey, I didn't get a phone call, but we also found that a lot of people's phone numbers were out of date. And yeah, the classic emergency personal preparedness is know the risks, make a plan, get a kit. And that's the conclusion. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you for your report and the work that you did. My concern is around the generator that failed. Do you feel that that will be an issue in the future, or has that resolved itself to your satisfaction?
The generator itself was repaired within about 3 hours of its initial failing, and it's, of course, we're going to make our, reviews of that a little more robust. But that wasn't the sort of cornerstone of the failure. The cornerstone was that communications block, and we believe it was just, sort of the several interruptions in power just kind of scrambled its brains a little bit. That's as near as we can describe it, or I can describe it in layperson's terms. But so we have a spare on once we found it, and we'll make sure that we have 2 spares next time, so the generator itself was fine. It's a 3-year-old generator. It's got 60 hours of time on it, so it's not a it's just a fluky thing to happen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Martin?
Thank you, Chair. I don't actually have a question, but I am considering putting forward a notice of motion. I was going to do it at another time, but now I think it's a perfect time to put forward the notice of motion. Is that okay to do at this time?
Ms. Snellgrove? Yes,
Add it later?
on the agenda when we get to notices of motion.
Okay, thank you.
If no one else, I just want to repeat, sorry, Councillor Gesselbrock?
Okay.
Through the chair to Mr. Sims, first off, thank you so much for all the work during the emergency and the response of all the staff and yourself. I know it was incredible amount of effort during that time to keep everything organized, so thank you. I've got a question just regarding, do we have any estimated cost of the windstorm to the city? My concern is just we're seeing an increase of these extreme weather events. What did this windstorm cost the city, if we have any idea?
Thank you, Your Worship. That's an excellent question, and I was kind of guessing it might come up. I think, through you to Councillor Gesselbrock's question, the numbers are kind of coming in, and in fact, we're still spending staff time against cleanup. We expect that that'll go on for several months, and for example, costs to date are like well over $100,000 in labor. So that's what we know today, but it's going to continue. One of the things that was not only the community pulled together, but the city as an organization pulled together. So we had the fire department, we had Public Works, we had Parks and Rec, we had other staff throughout the organization, switchboards, made a huge contribution. Everybody sort of came together, and it was, we stayed away from the whole silo mentality. It was a really positive thing.
Just to follow up, I'm grateful that the costs are tracking, just as if these increased extreme weather events are potentially increasing with climate change, it's important that our city tracks these costs so that we've got something to put a dollar value to the effect that it has on the community. So thank you very much, and thanks for your response.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Gesselbrock. If no further questions, I just want to repeat what's been said before. Thank you to all of the city staff who responded so well at a particularly problematic time of year when everyone is anticipating and working towards celebrating the Christmas holiday. And also, again, to thank the citizens of this community who, in remarkable numbers, with significant participation, stepped up to the plate to reduce water consumption, again, at a time of year when there's great pressure on the system. So. We will learn from this event, but thank you very much, Mr. Sims, for the report tonight. Appreciate it.
Your Worship.
The next item on the agenda is delegations. I would ask the first delegation, Mr. Terry Wagar, to step forward. And as I indicated earlier, I'm going to hold everyone to
Mayor
their...
Krogh?
Yes, sorry?
Those delegations are actually when the agenda item comes up. So right now, we'd be moving on to 10A reports.
I've got delegations as number 8 in my list, Ms. Snellgrove.
Yep, it is, but there aren't any listed there. Those delegations will speak when we get to that agenda item.
So we can't do them until we get to the motion?
So that would be 14A when those delegations.
14A, yes, sorry, you're quite right. My apologies, so we'll have to buzz through these motions. I'm not suggesting we do. We'll give them full consideration. Consent items, we have none. And then reports, the housing agreement, 548 Steves Road. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, we're seeking this evening direction from Council to proceed with the first 3 readings of a bylaw in order to enter into a housing agreement on the subject property. In terms of background, I would note that the zoning bylaw allows for density bonusing when developers meet a series of criteria. And there's basically in the bylaw, there's a shopping list of items that they can select from. And if they meet those items and they achieve the necessary points, it allows them to proceed with density bonusing on their project. So this developer has done that. There's been a development permit which has been issued, which allows for the higher density. But before we issue the building permit, we need to register a housing agreement in order to secure the one item that he's offered, and that is affordable housing. So in this case, the housing agreement will secure 2 of the units in this 24-unit development for units to be sold at 20% below the assessed value at the time of sale, and that will remain in place for 10 years for any future sale. And there's also a condition under the housing agreement which limits the ability for the strata to put a no rental provision on in the future. So in the long term, these units will continue to be available for rental.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. There is a recommendation with respect to the motion.
I move recommendations 1, 2, and 3 are must go by.
We'll have to do
So
them.
I'll move recommendation that housing agreement bylaw 2019 number 7280 to authorize a housing agreement between the City of Nanaimo and 0948 423 BC Limited pertaining to 548 Steves Road, pass first reading.
I have a seconder, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Councillor Gesselbrock.
I was under second. Oh, second. I'll wait.
Yes. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried. Thank you.
I move that housing agreement bylaw 2019 number 7280 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Discussion, Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair to Mr. Lindsay. Through the chair to Mr. Lindsay, I've got a question just on the these 2 units that'll be sold available for 20% below the appraised value. The duration's for 10 years, and my question is, we're giving the developer a density bonus, a greater density, and I assume that the capital gained through that is they get to keep for, in the long term. And my question is, how come there's a 10-year limit as opposed to indefinitely having these units be available 20% below so that, we get in exchange what we're giving?
Through your worship, to start with, the answer to that question is, I think it's important to understand that it's not just the housing agreement that provides for the additional bonus. There's other things that the applicant has provided. In this case, I know one of those items is public art, for example, so that needs to be provided and incorporated into the development. So the shopping list and the criteria of eligible requirements was established through the zoning bylaw. So we could certainly look at in the future of doing amendments to clarify that or to extend the requirement. But generally, we have a lower tier of density, and if somebody wants to obtain a higher tier, there's additional steps they have to go through. But in this case, they're asking for what we call Tier 1 density.
Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. I think Mr. Lindsay answered one of my questions. The other question I had, which I have a couple, is that there are 24 units, but according to the Category 7 Social and Cultural Sustainability, 10% of the units have to be offered at below market value, but they're only doing 2 out of 24, which is 8% and change.
Your Worship, the simple answer is we rounded down, so 2.4 units would be, you're correct in this case, so we went with the two units.
I would hope next time we round up and they put 3 on. The other question I had is in reading over the agreement, I'm not sure where the safeguards are to make sure that these remain as affordable housing. I understand that two of them can be sold at 20% less than the market rate. But there is no, there doesn't seem to be any conditions here that they have to be rented at below market rates. So they could be bought at below market rates, but then rented for market rates. Is there anything in the agreement that kind of protects us from there?
No, Your Worship, I did hear this point raised earlier, and I would agree that there's nothing in the agreement that stops that rental provision, rental ability from happening.
Okay, and the other little thing is, in the event that the agreement is canceled, and I understand this property is already built, correct?
No, Your Worship, they're submitted for building permit, but it has not yet been issued.
Oh, okay. In that case, what is to stop if in the event that say the developer wishes to just say, I'm not going to do this agreement, it's already been signed, and the buildings have already been built. What is our fallback in the event that the agreement is stopped to find some sort of remuneration or something like that to the lost affordability housing? I don't see anything here as in the agreement that says there's going to be a penalty.
I think, Your Worship, the answer is in our approach and in the timing of this process. So we require that the housing agreement get the approval of council through bylaw approval and be registered on title before the building permit's issued. So that way we guarantee that moving forward they would need to comply with that requirement. Sorry, did I answer your question? Not
quite, because in the event that they do require, and they do offer the two houses at below,
Yes.
but say, in the agreement, it doesn't say who can buy the houses. So in theory, the developer could buy the houses. And then they could then say, well, we don't like this agreement anymore 2 years later, and then they sell the houses at full market rate. What is our fallback in the event that the agreement does get canceled at that time?
So, Your Worship, at that point, they would be in violation of this agreement, and we would have to pursue, as we would with any other enforcement of any other legal contract.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Councillor Thorpe.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. The density bonusing, Mr. Lindsay, I didn't think we were still using floor area ratio. Am I incorrect in that? And can you talk about that calculation?
Certainly, Your Worship, the bylaw uses various forms to define density, and we'll often use units per hectare depending on if we're talking at a policy level at OCP or a unit level at, say, single family. But when we talk about multifamily development, the bylaw does use a FAR, or floor area ratio, as a way of determining density in many of our zones, not all, but many of our zones. And in this case, the density of a townhouse project is typically around 0.45 FAR. In this case, they're asking for that density, additional density of 0.55, so slightly higher density. But yes, we do use it.
All right, thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, thank you, Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. The one question I didn't ask was, for the purposes of this agreement or these agreements, is assessed value and market value one and the same?
The purpose in this agreement, we would actually, in order to determine the market value at the time of the sale, we would be getting an appraisal done of the property,
then, okay.
not based on the assessed value, because obviously units won't have existed yet, but we would actually use an appraiser to determine that value.
Good.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. Through the chair, I see in the contract, when it comes to the rentals, and that's great that there's no restrictions, but it does say that it would be able to be used as B&B, and short-term rentals are a concern for me. I'm wondering, is the intent to have long-term rentals?
Certainly the principle is to allow for long-term rentals. I think the purpose in the contract is just to clarify that short-term rentals are also permitted. So in any residential unit in the city right now, you can have what the bylaw refers to, somewhat of an antiquated term, I guess, of bed and breakfast, but short-term rental is permitted. Sorry.
Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. So the agreement that we have is with 094823 BC Limited, is that correct? So if they were to sell that at any time, does this agreement still stay in effect, or is that a condition of the sale?
That's a good point, Your Worship. It runs with the land, so regardless of who the future owner is, that condition will run with the property.
Thank you very much.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Councillor Bonner? Thank you. Second.
Agreement bylaw 2019, number 7280, passed third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Opposed, Councillor Bonner. Housing, item B, housing agreement respecting 1406 Bone Road. Again, Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, another housing agreement. In this case, we're asking for an amendment to an existing housing agreement for a project which has been constructed and occupied at 1406 Bowen Road. The housing agreement that was registered at the time identified 24 units in the project. In the end, the project was built with 25 units. So this, what we would consider minor amendment to the agreement, is just clarifying that there are 25 units on the property. Unfortunately, the only way to amend the agreement is through a bylaw, so we are asking for council to proceed with 3 readings of the associated amendment bylaw this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I make the motion that housing agreement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7262.01, to amend the bylaw to ensure that all existing and future housing units on the site are used for affordable housing, and to update an outdated reference to the Local Government Act. Pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried.
Motion that
Councillor
housing
Armstrong.
agreement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7262.01, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried.
And
Councillor Armstrong.
motion that housing agreement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7262.01, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Development variance permit application number DVP 371-5284 Sherbourne Drive. Mr. Lindsay again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. In this case, we have a development variance permit application seeking a variance in order to allow for a 2-lot subdivision. Specifically, the variance being requested is for the lot frontage requirements of the zoning bylaw, and as identified in the report, it's a variance from 15 meters to 10.16 meters for what is proposed Lot A. This is a variance of 4.84 meters. Your Worship, there is, I would note that the lots are deep in this area. In fact, both lots will end up being 46 meters deep, which is above the 30 meters required under bylaw. And they do meet the lot area requirements of the zoning bylaw. So from staff's perspective, these are buildable lots that are being created, and we are supporting the variance request.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone here wishing to speak with respect to development variance permit application number DVP 371-5284 Sherbourne Drive? Seeing no one, may we have the appropriate motion? Councillor Armstrong, seconded. Councillor Hemmons. Any discussion? Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And through you to Mr. Lindsay again. Will there be a community contribution for this variance?
To Your Worship, Councillor Bonner, the community contributions are considered at the time of rezoning only. We do not apply community contributions through variance applications, no.
Okay. And will the applicant be required to install a sidewalk on this thing, noting that there aren't any other sidewalks hardly in that particular neighborhood?
Your Worship, that is something that staff, engineering staff specifically, will look at with each application, so that's yet to be finally determined. I would, in this case, looking at some of the more recent activity in that neighborhood, I would suggest that it's likely we'd be looking for some works and services, including possibly sidewalks. I know there's properties a couple lots down from this site which have subdivided recently, including the lot on the corner, and I know there's both bid sidewalks there. Staff will look at each case individually. We will generally require improvements, frontage improvements, where we believe there's an opportunity in the near future for those to be continued by future development. We try not to encourage construction of infrastructure such as sidewalks where there's no immediate opportunity to have those works completed. So sorry, that was a bit of a long answer, but the short answer is it's likely we would be looking for frontage works and services which could include sidewalks, but may include other items including road paving, streetlights, fire hydrants, et cetera.
Your Worship, I think that hopefully this might be a conversation in the future where we have some flexibility in these. I'd rather, in this case, see the cost of the sidewalk put into affordable housing and not a sidewalk built. And the other question I have is, how much, I guess, how many DCCs will the city get for this subdivision, or will be getting any DCCs?
Your Worship, there'll be one development cost charge paid for the new lot. So that total is $17,800, just over $17,800 for both city and RDN DCCs per lot.
And finally, do we have any idea what the value of this lot might be on the open market?
Your Worship, the best I can offer is looking at similar lots in the neighborhood and their current assessed values. We identified at about $255,000.
So, thank you.
That's assessed value.
Yeah, and hopefully for a conversation in the future, I think that if we're going to be allowing subdivisions and stuff like that, that we get a little bit more bang for our buck sort of thing, so we can put it into affordable housing or something like that.
Thank you, Councillor Bonner. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. The next is item D, rezoning application number RA 406-111 Nickel Street. Again, Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is the first rezoning, site-specific rezoning application coming before council under the cannabis retail store system that's been set up. At present, we have 13 applications that are in stream. This first item is for 111 Nickel Street. So this evening, we're asking for council to consider first and second reading, at which point the application would be forwarded to the next scheduled public hearing, which is February the 7th.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
A motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.132, to rezone 11 Nickel Street to allow a site-specific cannabis retail store use in the Gateway DT12 zone pass first reading.
Second.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried, none opposed. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2019, number 4500.132, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Councillor Thorpe.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay. I read the report, but it wasn't clear to me, and I just wanted to clarify. This applicant, are they currently open? Have they been open for business, or are they closed pending the necessary government approvals?
Your Worship, I'm sorry, I don't know that off the top of my head. Many of these operators which are applying to the province to be officially licensed by the province have continued to operate but not sell cannabis specifically, but sell other items, but have withheld from selling cannabis. I don't know the specific store though.
Thank you.
Sorry, Your Worship, I just follow up. It is something we could clarify. If this bylaw proceeds, we could clarify at the time of the public hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Lindsay or whoever else might have the answer. I have a bit of a challenge because there have been pot shops, for lack of a better term, that have been rated by the RCMP in the past. I don't know what the status is, whether or not licensing from the province will be given if they haven't been rated, or if they've been rated, they won't get a license. It's a real, to me, I know the city probably doesn't have any say in this, but do we get information like that with regard to whether or not there have been illegal activities, I guess, for lack of a better term?
Mr. Lindsay.
So, Your Worship, I think there's sort of two parts to that answer. And the first is to clarify that all existing pot shops in the city are illegal at this point. All applications, all existing storefronts are illegal. The second is that the role of council is to look at the land use, and is it the appropriate land use. The province will be making the final determination on the licensing, and they will be determining whether individuals or companies are deemed fit and proper. This is their term. Is someone fit and proper to hold a license? They'll be making those determinations, and I think considering some of the facts that you've mentioned here tonight.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong?
I motion that council direct staff to secure the amenity contribution and BC Liquor and Cannabis Regulation Branch approval prior to adoption of the bylaw, should council support the bylaw at third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Item E, proposed road closure, part of Labio Road and land exchange at 2560 Bowen Road. Again, Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. As you mentioned, we're seeking council's approval this evening to proceed with first and second reading of a road closure bylaw in order to facilitate a land exchange. In this case, there's a portion of unconstructed city road right-of-way on Labio Road, and we're proposing to exchange that with the property owner. The areas are the same. They're 296.5 square meters, so it's a simple exchange of land for land.
1 and 2, can we move 1 and 2 in one motion? Yes. Seconded, moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Hemmons. Motions 1 and 2 is set out. Any discussion on this? Everyone has read their material. This is a promising thing always. No further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. And finally, a motion with respect to 3.
Motion that highway closure and dedication removal bylaw 209 number 7274 to provide for highway closure and dedication removal of a portion of Labio Road adjacent to 2560 Bowen Road pass first reading.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Before we pass this motion, just in case anyone's not paying close attention, this is going to result in the eventually extension of Kenworth Road into a roundabout, which will tie into Labio Road, which will be a good boost for traffic and dealing with congestion in the area. So this is a positive step forward. We need a motion.
Motion that highway closure and dedication removal bylaw 2019 7274 pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Bonner. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Item F, smoking regulation bylaw. Mr. Lindsay, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the time that the council established the Cannabis Task Force, there was a number of recommendations that came forward, including recommendations around storefront commercial cannabis, but there's also recommendations about revising our existing smoking bylaw to clarify where the use of cannabis was prohibited. So that bylaw did come forward to council. It did already receive 3 readings. But in our review and in further engagement with our stakeholders, we've identified some amendments that we believe should be considered at this time. So we're asking for council to actually rescind the bylaw and give third reading to a revised bylaw. And Your Worship, just to cover quickly the points we're asking council to amend. One is the current draft bylaw has a provision of a 7.5 meter setback from doorways and openings to buildings for smoking in general, all types of smoking. There's the current provincial regulation on this is 6 meters. So we felt it was better to be consistent and not have any confusion on that. So we've talked to the medical health officer about that, and they understand that we're going to be amending our bylaw to be consistent with provincial regulations. The second is we're also bringing forward some amendments to our parks bylaw, and the parks bylaw currently has some restrictions about smoking. We felt it would be better to incorporate all of the smoking restrictions in one bylaw. So we're actually revising this bylaw to clarify that it also covers and includes parkland and make sure that the 2 bylaws are consistent. And the third is to allow for a dispute mechanism within the bylaw and allow for to proceed under our enforcement bylaw. So we're asking for amendments to the enforcement bylaw to incorporate the smoking bylaw as an eligible item for adjudication, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Motion that council rescind third reading of smoking regulation bylaw 2018, number 7268, to regulate smoking in the city of Nanaimo.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you.
Motion that council approve revisions to the proposed smoking regulation bylaw number 2018, number 7268 at third reading, as outlined in this report, to revise buffer zones, ensure consistency with Parks, Recreation, and Culture Regulation bylaw 208, number 7073, and provide an adjudication process.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Again, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. No one opposed, I'm noting.
Motion that smoking regulation bylaw 2018, number 7268, pass third reading as amended.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Again, any discussion? No. All those in favor? Motion carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7159.03, to include a schedule of penalties related to smoking regulation bylaw 2018, number 7268, pass first reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried, again unanimously. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7159.03, pass second reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Again, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried again unanimously. And Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that bylaw notice enforcement amendment bylaw 2019, number 7159.03, pass third reading.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? Again, all those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you. Item G, Nanaimo Pride Society multi-year funding request. Ms. Mercer, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the December 12th, 2018 Special Council meeting, the Nanaimo Pride Society came before Council asking for a multi-year agreement with the city, and Council had at that point referred it back to staff for a report. So this report reflects that staff is looking for Council's direction as to how they wish they would like to deal with this agreement.
Thank you. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you, I'm prepared to make a motion on this item. I think it's an agenda topic that is part of a larger discussion regarding policy, and I will have a separate motion later on in the meeting dealing with that. But in terms of this item, I note that staff have offered several possible options or suggestions. My motion is not following any of those, so I'll put it on the table and see what council thinks of it, and if they feel it's not appropriate or a referral to a later date is more appropriate, so be it. But my motion is this, if I can receive a seconder, that council award Nanaimo Pride Society $5,000 from council contingency funding for 2019 as a one-time grant. And I will speak to that if there is a seconder.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. So as Ms. Mercer just pointed out, the request was for a multi-year agreement or funding of $10,000 annually. And in the past, this organization has applied for event funding, and I note that they received last year $4,400. This year, they unfortunately missed the application deadline, which caused their appearance in front of council recently. I certainly recognize the value of the Pride Society to our community, and I recognize that they've received grant funding in the past. I'm sympathetic to the fact that they missed the deadline this year, so my motion would accommodate them somewhat, despite their error in applying. However, I cannot support multi-year funding at this time, as I think it would simply be unfair to other groups who stage events in our community, and we could end up with all nonprofit organizations coming to request annual operational grants, which we simply cannot afford. I think giving $10,000 would seriously impact our ability to fund other events that might come before us. So in future, I would hope that the Pride Society would continue to apply for event funding on an annual basis, and make sure that they meet the application deadline. But I think my motion helps address their immediate need for this year, and we can look at the longer term, as I said, with a separate motion later. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Armstrong.
I will vote against the motion. I would like to see a minimum of 7,500 towards that. I would prefer to have the 2 to 3 years. However, I recognize that probably it should be part of a bigger discussion amongst council regarding all grants. I think that this is a very important thing for our city. It brings in a lot of people here. It brings a lot of revenue in. A lot of people come out. People come here from the mainland. People come from Victoria. Our hotels are used. Our restaurants are used. So I think the original ask was $7,500, and I would be supportive of 7,500. Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Turley, I hit you too fast.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Thorpe's motion, and we'll be voting in favor of it, because the other fact that we have to consider is that it's not just the 5,000 or the 7,500. There's considerable expense that goes to painting the sidewalks, as well as setting out the barricades, et cetera, for the parade, which are all, of course, come out of city coffers. So I think we have to bear that in mind as well.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I will be voting against this motion. Well, I do agree with Councillor Thorpe that the multi-year funding, not just for this particular ask, but for asks in general, is wrapped up in a larger policy discussion. So I do support the aspect of the 1 year. However, I would support the full ask of the $10,000. Because when we look at this type of event, it's growing, it's important, and at a time where we're trying to breathe life into our downtown, I absolutely support events like this, very inclusive events like this in our downtown that bring people there, and as Councillor Armstrong pointed out, it fills restaurants, it fills hotels, so the social aspects, the economic aspects of this event are highly important, so I will be voting against this motion, and depending on how the vote goes, proposing that it be funded in the full 10,000.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. And my notes have me down at 7,500, which is what the original ask would have been had they got it in on time. And that's kind of where I was going with that number. I also was going to note here that I would like to see council have a policy moving forward so that some of the organizations that do get multiple year funding from us possibly become a line item in our budget. And that would free up money for other organizations who are just starting out to have events as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bonner. I believe Councillor Thorpe is going to satisfy your wishes in a little while. Any further discussion? Councillor Markman and then Councillor Gesselbrock.
I was just going to say, although I seconded for discussion, I'm more in favor of us reviewing 7,500 or 10,000. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Through the chair, I agree with the intention of Councillor Thorpe. I think we need to review the policy on multi-year funding. I think the amount for this event, the initial grant application was for $7,500, and I would support a motion for that amount. So I will be voting against the current motion as it stands, unless there's appetite for an amendment.
Friendly amendment.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you. Thank you, Your Worship. I'll just point out the reason for my figure of $5,000, and that is that for the past 2 years, the Pride Association has received $4,330 in 2017, and as I believe I said, $4,400 in 2018. So their ask, yes, would have been for $7,500 this year. I can't assume that they would have received the full amount. So I thought 5,000 was slightly more than last year, and that would be a reasonable amount. So that's the reason for my figure. If this is defeated, I'm prepared to consider $7,500, certainly. Thank you.
I'm not sure whether I'm presiding over a council meeting or a negotiation. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion at 5,000? contrary? Ms. Snellgrove, you're able to catch all of that? Is there another motion coming forward now? Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Worship. I would move that the full grant request from the Nanaimo Pride Society be endorsed for 2019 to an amount of $10,000 from the Council Contingency Fund.
Do we have a seconder? We don't have a seconder, Councillor Brown. Councillor Armstrong. Pardon me, Councillor Hemmens beat you to it. She's on the light first, sorry.
I might need help with this wording, but I move that the city provide the applicant with the original $7,500 downtown event grant out of council contingency.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong. Any discussion? At 75? Going once, going twice? Councillor Turley.
Sorry, one of my hearing aids is not working. So what, could I have that repeated, please, because I didn't hear all of it, so.
Please, Councillor Hemmens.
I'm moving that council funds $7,500 towards the Pride event this year. I was just asking for help with wording of the motion. $7,500.
Question's been called. All those in favor of the motion? Motion carried. Any opposed? Thank you very much, everyone. The second is, of these kinds of motions, is the 9-1 District BC SPCA grant application. Ms. Mercer, again, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, at the December 12th, 2018 special council meeting, the Nanaimo and District SPCA came in front of council asking for $25,000 towards their spay and neuter program. And again, council referred this back to staff for a report. And tonight, staff is looking for council's direction on what they would like to do with regards to this ask.
Do we have a motion?
Yes.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll try again. I think this is similar to the last request, but slightly different, and so I will make a motion and speak to it if I am seconded. And my motion is staff option number 2 in our report, and that council approve the grant over 2 years at $12,500 per year funded from general taxation.
Do we have a seconder? Councillor Armstrong.
And I'll speak to it if I may.
Please.
As I said, slightly different than the last issue in that this item does not qualify as an event application. 2 years ago, council granted a similar funding request, taking funds from council contingency. I don't see us continuing down that path. The SNP program, I think, in my opinion, has proven beneficial to the community, and it does deserve to be funded through taxation, not drawing from council contingency, which is meant for more emergent situations. So rather than making it an annual operating grant, I feel we can reassess after 2 years to determine the best funding method. At that time, we may wish to make it an annual line item, or we may wish to cut off funding or snip it, if I dare say that. So I see my motion as a middle ground. It allows a valuable service to be continued for the next 2 years, and in the longer term, I'll have a separate motion. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will support Ian's motion, or Councillor Thorpe's motion, sorry. The other thing I think we need to point out is that according to their information here, when the money that was granted for the SNP program appears to have lasted for well over a year, in some cases over 2 years. And I'm in favor of funding a program, but I'm not in favor of topping up to a specific level in a particular year. And the thing that I think you have to bear in mind is if the program is extremely successful, it may not be needed.
Thank you, Councillor Turley. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is one of these negotiation things. Again, I had it down for 10,000, but I'm fine with the motion. I would prefer to do it for 1 year, similar to what we're doing for the other things we talked about tonight. But I also like the option that that the staff recommended that we get some sort of reporting. I could see this as a line item, but I would much prefer to see a more formal reporting of the amount of work that was done. And not only that, the outcome measures of it. How can we say that this was a good, valuable spending of taxpayers' money if we don't know what actually happened after it was done? Like, I'll be looking for the outcome measures of this type of arrangement. But I'll vote for the motion because I know we're going to get to it eventually. I'm sorting this out.
If I may say, I think the cats know what happened. Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I am in favor of the programming as well as our support of it. I'm in favor of dividing funding across 2 years, given that the society seems to spread the monies out. I am not in favor of it coming from general taxation. I think we're asking the residents of Nanaimo to take a fairly substantial hit this year, but I would be in favor of it coming from council contingency, so I will not be supporting the motion as stated.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. Just along that line, through you to Ms. Mercer, the 0.01% tax increase equals what per household? Do you know? Like $10 or
Through your
less?
worship to Councillor Armstrong. I'm not exactly sure what it is per household. I can figure that out, but it's 0.0, just a little over 0.01%.
$2?
Yeah,
Year?
it's not very much.
It's not a lot. Thank you.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
I'm in favor of the motion. I think that the 12,500 per year for the next 2 years is good, and I think a more discussion needs to happen on consistent funding. So I would also support an ongoing operational grant. I know that this program is very important in terms of reducing the stray cat population. There's suffering to the cats. It also has big impact on our bird population. And it's something that consistent effort needs to put on to get the population low, because if you don't keep up with it, you get exponential growth, and we don't want that with our cat population. So I support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Further to Councillor Hemmons' comments there, and through you to Ms. Mercer there, could we pay this out of surplus because it's a specific amount of money only over 2 years? Could that come out of surplus that we're going to be looking at soon?
Ms. Mercer.
Through your worship to Councillor Bonner. Yes, you could, but I wouldn't recommend that just because we don't know how much of a surplus, if any, we will have at the end of the year. I think it's better to fund it from other taxation or a current council contingency or one of those that are already in the budget. Counting on surplus at the end of the year can be a little bit of a dangerous game because you don't know what you're going to have at the end.
Aren't you supposed to know?
Oh, sorry, you meant of the 2018. Sorry, I was thinking I'm already ahead into 2019. Yeah, we could, there is some money at this point, I don't know the exact dollar, but we could carry forward money for that, yes.
Yeah, and the only reason I brought it up is because it's finite. It's not like we're doing this over 4 years, so it wouldn't affect the budget then if it came out of that. So.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this may be slightly off topic, but that's nothing new for me. So given the fact that we have dog licensing, I'm not aware that we have cat licensing. And in my, okay, you're not supposed to laugh at that. It just appears to me that this is an issue regarding cats and potentially cat owners that you know, we don't appear to have the same issue with feral dogs. So maybe this is a discussion we should have at a future date, but that certainly would provide the funding to fund the program.
Proving once again the amount of debate is directly proportional to the amount of money involved. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will be brief. And Councillor Turley is quite right, and the subject of cats is come to this table before, and I'm sure it will again, and stimulate a lot of discussion. I would just like to respond to Councillor Hemmons' suggestion and rebut it that, to me, this is a service to the community, and it's more appropriate that it comes out of public taxation for the very small amount that it's going to affect the budget, rather than use a contingency fund or indeed a reserve fund. Thank you.
Are we done? All those in favor of the motion, which is 12.5 for a year, each year for, pardon me, Councillor Armstrong.
I just want to know where the funding is coming from before I vote. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. All those in favor? Opposed? Councillors Brown and Hemmons opposed? Thank you very much. Motion carried.
Your Worship. Subsequent motion.
Yes. The municipal and regional, sorry. Councillor Thorpe, sorry.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I indicated, I would have a subsequent motion, and I think this is the place for it. I had intended originally this to be a notice of motion, but I believe Council might be receptive to hearing it tonight, so I will make it as a motion. And the motion is that staff be directed to develop a policy that provides direction and expectations for responding to requests from nonprofit organizations for financial support outside of the current grant programs.
Seconded, Councillor Brown. Excellent motion. Any discussion? Very good. We are in agreement. Councillor Thorpe, you don't have to speak to it.
All right.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Unanimous. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
The next item is Municipal and Regional District Tax allocation of online accommodation platform known as OAP revenues. Ms. Mercer, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. Currently, the city collects 2% tax on accommodation sales within the city. And effective October 1st, this 2% was updated to include online accommodation bookings. And the province at that time also announced that the money collected from the online accommodation bookings could be used for affordable housing projects. And so staff is looking for council's direction on whether they want to allocate this new revenue to affordable housing or keep it with the other funds we collect and put it towards tourism marketing and for programs and projects.
Thank you. Looking for a motion. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to make a motion that Council directs staff to submit the necessary documentations to Destination BC to allocate the online accommodation platform revenue to the Housing Legacy Reserve to fund affordable housing initiatives.
Second.
Get in line.
I'm glad that everyone's anxious to second it, but I'm just going to recognize Councillor Brown because I was leaning that way when I looked. Any discussion on the motion? Councillor Gesselbrock.
I think this is an excellent idea, and I support it wholeheartedly.
No need to gild the lily. Excellent. Councillor Turley.
So the only question I have is, how does tourism feel about it?
Councillor Armstrong.
Sorry, through the chair to Councillor Shirley. In conversation with tourism and the Hotel Association, there wasn't any pushback in talking to the tourism group. They were fine with this, so I don't think there was any, at least I didn't hear any pushback for doing that.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Just in follow-up to that comment, I think it's important to note that we currently collect quite a bit through the MRDT tax that is used to fund a lot of our grant programming. And when folks do stay in temporary, short-term vacation rentals, they haven't typically been paying into those sort of programming. And so I really like this motion. I really like that the current provincial government has also realized that there is a housing program, and typically short-term vacation rentals can take away from some of the rental stock, so they allow it to be diverted to housing. So I think it respects the hotel industry that for a long time has been providing funds through the MRDT tax to fund a lot of our grant programming. and our tourism-related initiatives, but it also acknowledges the fact that we do have a housing affordability problem, and it's not a huge amount, but any amount helps.
Thank you very much. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Coming to the section bylaws, official community plan amendment bylaw number 2018, number 6500.038.
Motion that official community plan amendment bylaw 2018, number 6500.038, OCP 87, to redesignate 40 Mackey Road on the future land use plan, map 1, from neighborhood to light industrial, and to redesignate 40 Mackey Road on the Chase River Neighborhood Plan Land Use Schedule A from low-medium density residential to service industrial enterprise area be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. Any opposed? Seeing none, unanimous. Thank you. Councillor Armstrong, please.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2018, number 4500.119, RA 386, to rezone 40 Mackey Road from single dwelling residential R1 to highway industrial I1 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried again, unanimous. Thank you. Item C.
Motion that zoning amendment bylaw 2018, number 4500.130, to rezone portions of the subject properties at 5400 Dewar Road, 5351 Redmond Road, and the adjacent Redmond Road right-of-way from single dwelling residential R1 to steep slope residential R10, and Parks, Recreation and Culture 1, PRC 1, and steep slope residential R10 to Parks, Recreation, Culture 1, PRC 1 be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Again, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion carried. None opposed, I notice. And item D, highway closure and dedication removal bylaw number 2018, number 7275. Councillor Armstrong.
Motion that highway closure and dedication removal bylaw 2018, number 7275, to provide for highway closure and dedication removal of a portion of Redmond Road adjacent to 5400 Dewar Road and 5351 Redmond Road be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. Again, any discussion? All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion carried again, unanimous. Thank you. We have no correspondence, Ms. Snellgrove, as I understand it, and under notices of motion,
Yes.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I was thinking of this at a later date, but after Mr. Sims' presentation of our windstorm and with other cities and other municipalities looking at this, I'd like to give a notice of motion that the city of Nanaimo declare a climate emergency and takes a leadership role towards achieving carbon neutrality by 2030.
It's just a notice.
Just a
Seconded,
notice.
Councillor Hemmons. No, pardon me, this
Just a
is
notice.
just a notice, yes, thank you.
Notice.
Don't speak to it.
We're giving notice. We're on the road, but we're not moving too quickly just yet. Thank you very much. Any other notices of motion? On to other business. Councillor Armstrong, motion re-nuisance properties, and we have delegations.
Yes, my motion is to have staff to explore 2020 Labio Road and 250 Terminal Avenue to see if they conform with the nuisance property bylaw. This report is for information purposes, which is to be shared with the public, and it is only to be gathered for information purposes at this time for use at a later date, if required.
And we have a seconder? Pardon me?
Okay.
Just,
We have a number of delegations that should
we
be
hear
heard
those
before the vote
first?
takes place.
Thank you.
Do you want to do it after, or reread it? Okay. Because in the thing it says deeming, like, that is not my intent. My intent was to receive a report from staff, including reports from police, neighborhoods, residents themselves, so that we can make an informed decision as to what is occurring at Labio Road, And in order to use, to think of a way that I could do that, the thing that came to mind was a nuisance abatement and cost recovery bylaw, because at a later date, that is what would be used. So that was why I termed the nuisance abatement and cost recovery. My intent is to get a report as to what is actually happening, so council is acting based on information that is relevant, not rumors and innuendos. The public is aware of the information that is coming into council, because right now all the information we are receiving has been in camera, which cannot be released to the public. Thank you.
Ms. Stelgrove, appropriate to take comments before we do the delegations?
Delegations first.
That's what I believe too. Terry Wagar. Mr. Wagar, please come forward. As I indicated, I'm going to be strict this week. When the light goes to orange, you'll have a minute left. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for letting me speak. So I'm here tonight. I live on I live near the site on 250 Terminal Avenue. I live on Caledonia. And I'm here tonight on behalf of a group of neighbors that I belong to called Friends of 250. We're largely homeowners that live in the neighborhood, with 2 or 3 exceptions. And most of us have been living around there for years. I've been there for 8 years myself. And we've seen crime wax and wane in the neighborhood, as well as homelessness. I've had to deal with it myself many times, and so I'm well familiar that it's part of the neighborhood and has been for years. When I found out, and when we found out that there was going to be a temporary site moving in there, we were glad, because we understand that there's several hundred homeless people in this community, and they need somewhere to go, and they need help. And we think that as a community, we should be providing that help for them. So we were glad to see it, and it's been there for a while now, and you know, we're around it all the time, and we really don't see much of a difference around there, other than the fact that there's a lot of security guards everywhere. And to be honest, I think that makes the neighborhood safer, because, well, if there's security guards standing right there, nobody's going to break into the cars nearby, et cetera. So we haven't seen a lot of change in the term of, like safety or anything like that. We don't feel less safe. I'm not saying that we felt completely safe beforehand, but we don't feel any less safe now. So that brings me to tonight. Oh yeah, by the way, you know, as you may know, we're the people that, we actually want to welcome these people, and so we got welcome bags for them when they moved in, and we got them Christmas gifts as well, for Labio as well. But now this brings me tonight, and you know, my primary concern is the neighborhood that I live in, like most people's. But I think that for starters, we should consider that these are 2 different neighborhoods, 2 different houses, so to speak, 2 different service providers. And I don't think they should be lumped together. I don't think they should be considered together. I think they should be considered separately, because they're operated separately, and they have a different sort of a people living there. The one in Labio has couples, for instance. In any case, they're separate. Now, we know there's concerns, and we don't blame people for being concerned. But we don't, as we share the concern that there is no facts. We don't think that you have to get facts by initiating this type of a process. You know, to me it sounds sort of, no matter how you gussy it up, in the end, it's information that will be used possibly in a nuisance bylaw abatement provision. And unlike the last time that was used on the Metro Drive property, which I'm sure you're all well aware of, had a lengthy history of criminal activity culminating in a huge bust involving drugs and guns. These places are, you know, social service agency operated service establishments funded by the government that are actually trying to help people. Furthermore, they were rushed into operation on very short notice, and they've only been there for a few weeks. They are working their best. I was there just today. I see that they're putting in a C-can at 250 Terminal Avenue so that they can better regulate guests. They're making the fence 9 feet tall. Why? Because the neighborhood complained. So that's why the fence is there, because the neighbors complained. They are trying their best. They are not looking for trouble. They are not causing trouble in the neighborhood. So I ask that instead of you know.
1 minute, Mr. Wagar.
Thank you. I ask that instead of you exploring the process, the information that required to make the designation of nuisance property, that you initiate a consultation process with these service organizations, tell them that you want to work with them and help them and establish ground rules and methods of operation that will benefit both them and the neighborhood. I think we need to help these people. I ask that you, on behalf of Friends of 250 and everybody that cares about humanity in this town, to just help these people and to encourage our provincial government to provide more detox, more treatment beds, more help for them. They need more help. They need more than these places. But you know what? They also need more than these places. I think we need at least 2 more. And I would ask that you, instead of going forward with this motion, either rescind it completely or amend it in some fashion that it has nothing to do with the nuisance bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Wagar.
Thank you.
No clapping, please. We're going to run these meetings appropriately. Thank you. Does council have any questions for the delegation?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Wagar. The next is a delegation, Trevor Heshka.
Thank you, Worship and Council, and thanks to City staff for getting me in here as well. I was going to write something here today for you folks. I like to write, however, I thought it'd be better if I spoke from the heart, and this way I get to look at all of you as well. I think your body language will tell me a lot more than the actual words in which are said this evening. I come here to speak not only on behalf of myself, but a wide range of different folks in the community here tonight. I notice there's a lot of vigilanteism that's growing in this community. I'm online quite a lot for those that don't know. And I got a 10-year-old daughter. She means the world to me, more so than anyone else. Better include my mom, who's in the gallery as well, or I might end up walking home tonight. Anyways, I'm starting to get a little fed up myself with some of the activity that goes around on these sites. I was stolen from last Friday night. Made the mistake of leaving my car unlocked 2 Thursdays ago. Of course, it got ravaged through. I've had my car broken into. Previously, I owned a truck. I had my truck window smashed out to grab what was ever inside of the truck. I've had an increase of drunk and seemingly drug-addicted people coming past my place. I live in the old city quarter now. I absolutely love it. But I'm getting a little tired of some of the things that are happening in our community. So what I wanted to address is actually quite a number of things. I think we're taking some steps in the right direction on the homelessness thing, but I want to know what our city's doing to work with the province in regards to addiction. I want to know what we're doing to address mental health, like some of these people should be in mental health housing, not in the type of housing that we have, that got set up kind of like this. We sort of needed the housing, but we had no real plan behind that. I think we're lacking in communication to the general public itself. Like, nobody really knows what's happening, so that's how we're seeing that this frustration is growing. It's kind of become common knowledge in Nanaimo that if you get stolen from and it's less than $1,000, too bad for you. What do? You can't do anything to defend yourself. I had a great conversation with a lady from the RCMP this weekend, and from what I understand, the RCMP are kind of spinning their wheels as well. I believe we spent approximately $40 million on the RCMP here in Nanaimo. And how much of that time is just going to waste because we as a city aren't going after the province for their responsibilities. We've got a court annex on Selby Street that sits empty. I'd like to know why that is. The province doesn't really respond to me on that. I understand that the Crown is quite busy. One time I was stolen from, I was told that they could identify one of the criminals but not the second criminal, so the Crown didn't want to go ahead with the charges. Well, how fair is that to me, and how long does it take before, I start to become that vigilante? And I made a comment on Facebook the other day that I kind of regretted about starting to become a NIMBY, right? Because I don't have a whole lot of income in my life at the moment, because there's a couple back injuries and a foot problem, but...
1 minute, Mr. Eshka, please.
Thank you. I think that's pretty much all that I covered. I didn't write this down. I kind of wish I had now. And the only other thing I think was a comment in regards to our committees. You folks need to get our committees set up again, and so that we can keep dealing with these problems, right? Like, obviously, you folks have a lot of different issues to deal with, and I wanted to bring up a whole whack of things at one time that I get practically no response from the province other than a form letter in regards to, and some things that I want you folks to think about and let the public know on what we're doing on these, because that negativity spreads quick and much faster than the positive things do in our community. So let's do something to curb that while we can before we get too far ahead and end up being like Surrey. And I'll leave it at that because I got 4 seconds.
Thank you, Mr. Eshka. I appreciate your compliance with it. I'm sorry, please, no clapping. Mr. Eshka, do we have any questions from any members of council? No. Thank you very much. Ms. Lynn Burrows?
Good evening, Your Worship, Mayor Krogh and councillors. I would like to bring some relevant information to your attention, and I thank Richard Powell from Island Crisis Care Society for providing me with more current information today. Should I bring this down a little bit? Both locations have not even been operating 2 months. In regards to 250 Terminal, its kitchen facility and common area have not been operable. The kitchen should begin full operation this week. Island Health nurses and caseworkers should have their on-site offices fully functioning soon, maybe even this week. For several weeks, there has been a nurse available on site as much as possible. His services have been very helpful and greatly appreciated by all concerned. In addition, medical and health services professionals plan to be on site every weekday for 2 hours minimum. As you are hearing, many area residents from 250 Terminal have not noticed additional safety concerns since the facility opened, and point out that theft and break-ins have been ongoing for at least a few years, and in their opinion, things have not gotten worse. For your information, in the last week, there were 4 incidents at 250 Terminal requiring emergency response. One was a trespasser, one was the RCMP showing up on a matter they were investigating, and 2 were health-related. The week before had similar numbers. These numbers are for a property with 78 people. Resecurity at 250 Terminal. As of last week, locking doors and video cameras are now operating. A new security company with employees trained in diffusing escalating behavior is transitioning with the existing security company. These new workers are engaging professionally and warmly with the neighbors. They will walk people to their cars if they feel unsafe, etc. 250 Terminal has had a no visitors policy until all security measures are in place. An improved front entry procedure and welcome center being worked on this week will make things more secure and friendly. Then they can start allowing guests, but the guests will have to sign in and out. In my past research regarding supportive housing, I found that in almost 100% of the time, although initially many neighboring residents were strongly against having supportive or wet housing in their neighborhoods, once these facilities were built and people had moved into them, it became obvious to these same people that their initial concerns were not warranted. Often they even volunteered to help welcome and became involved as supportive neighbors. Some became active with the community advisory committees associated with the supportive housing. Here in Nanaimo, a year-long study of the Uplands Walk project in the Dover Bay community was conducted by Vancouver Island University students and Pacifica Housing. Challenges identified and anticipated initially by Dover Bay residents in 2015 did not materialize after the facility was fully operating. Dover Bay property values still increased, 13% increase versus a 14% increase for the whole of Vancouver Island. There was no perceptible increase in neighborhood crime rates. Initial neighborhood crime and safety concerns and school proximity concerns went way down, as well as the general level of community concern once the facility was functioning. At 250 Terminal and 2020 La Bayou, much attention. Thank you. Much attention is being given to help residents move forward with their lives. We are already hearing some encouraging stories. These two facilities now have community advisory committees composed of nearby residents, police, Island Health, BC Housing, city staffing, and others. Let's give these emergency supportive housing facilities all possible support with continued reassurance that we as a community want them to succeed. I'm thinking it might be helpful if you were to sit down with reps from Island Crisis Care Society and Pacifica Housing to discuss potential ways the city could exist with the smooth running of these two locations. Although not open to general public, there is a community advisory meeting coming up this Thursday, and I expect your participation would be welcomed and encouraged. If this is of interest, you can contact Michelle at Island Care Crisis Society. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Burrows, right on time. Any questions? Councillor Armstrong?
Yes, Ms. Burrows. In regards to Uplands Walk, are you aware that there's only 33 units and the age must be over 45? So to me, it's an unfair comparison.
That's true.
Yeah,
That's a very good point.
Yeah, and are you also aware that research shows that once most people hit over the age of 45, that they tend to get out of a cycle of crime?
Yes, I'm aware, and that's important to point to bring up.
And my third point, many of the people that are at this are at 250 Terminal are addicts. Is that correct? That are
not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Yeah. Well, the information I was given that there's a lot there, and the issue that I have, if an addict can't get its fix, they will do whatever they can to get their fix, and they don't have money. So how then are they getting their supply of drugs if they don't have money?
Some of the people there are not addicts. The people that were picked to go there were people they thought would benefit and could move on in that place.
See, those are some of my concerns, because I've heard from police and people on the ACT team, the ACT team, that they recommended certain individuals shouldn't be in there, and they went against their recommendations. That's why I'm asking for a report. I want a report which led us to this day. I think the other issue is...
Councillor Armstrong, with respect, you're entitled to question the delegation. You'll have a chance to speak to your motion.
But I'm asking the delegation questions on information that she gave to people.
Ask her questions,
I'm asking
that
for
would be
clarification.
appreciated.
Okay, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, thank you for your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Ken Clark? Good evening, Mr. Clark.
Good evening. Figure I'd dress for the job that I'm trying to get here, which doesn't pay anything, just so you know. I'm going to read through this quick because I know I only got about 5 minutes, so bear with me if I sound like the Micro Machine Man. I'm going to do this quick because I got a lot of things I want to get out. Thank you very much for allowing me the time to discuss everything at the podium, Your Worship and Council. I really appreciate your time. It means a lot to me, the fact that I got up here. This isn't easy for me. This isn't my first thing, so, you can rest assured I'm very nervous getting up here, but I'm just going to go with it. I can see the incredible conundrum that you guys are facing with the homelessness and the fentanyl crisis. The drug crisis is pounding its ugly head around every single corner. I must praise all the city staff for your tireless work, for those who have been involved with the 250 and the Labio. Sorry, one second. and our city, these housing projects are a great asset to our homeless issue in Nanaimo. I do not look against these. I think they are a good thing. However, how they are run is absolutely disgusting. How this town has allowed this to happen, previous council, whoever it has allowed this to happen, it's horrible. My son even knows now, don't go to the parks, he's afraid. Maybe it's brought on by his sister, or my fear of them picking up a needle and stabbing themselves, whatever it may be. I would like to speak in favor of Mrs. Armstrong's motion tonight, not because we are hating on the clients of there, but because there's probably about 15, 20 of them that are conducting most of the crimes in our community, and nothing's being done. Our hands are still tied behind our back. I did notice massive changes in a lot of things that happened with you guys or with the council, or things that have taken effect over the last couple days after the last council meeting. I know most of that thing was directed towards me, but I do know that the question I was asking was not able to be answered. So that's why I kind of just walked away. I knew that it wouldn't be able to. These groups have, or this specific housing has allowed these people to come in here, and they're supposed to have a one strike, you're out. And yet, if the people were actually monitoring their own people outside what they're doing, they would understand that they're not even getting 100 meters down the road and their strike is already over. It's still happening. We are waiting and believing in the police force, that the police force is willing and ready to tackle this. I know quite a few people on the force. I actually live around my house. I have 3 people. Time's running quick. I have 3 cops that live within 50 yards of my house, and they all face the same crap as I did last year, you know, short of wanting to draw their gun. I'm really hoping that they are given the powers to do what they need to do in order to conduct their jobs properly instead of having their hands tied behind their back. They make an arrest, they go to jail. The jails are almost always empty. And then they go to in front of prosecution, and there's nothing. They get a slap on the wrist, they're out the next day. You know, innocent person was killed last week because a criminal that was, you know, he was out. Where was justice in that? Like, we have laws, we're supposed to be abiding by these laws. We all have to serve these laws. We all have to follow them. What makes them any different than us? Can't even go to, you know, schools have been contacting you guys continuously. Paraphernalia found around, horrible, despicable things are happening. People are being broken into their houses, beaten, tied up. Like, are we on the purge here? We are ready and prepared to consistently take the podium on these matters. I'm just getting started. If we have to continue this every single week, I'm going to donate my time. I'm going to take a back burner with my company to focus on this, because this is worth more to me than any dollar figure that my company can make. That's why I hired people. Thank you for allowing me the time to speak today on these matters. One thing I'm going to bring up.
1 minute, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
So an attic usually uses roughly about $3,000 in stuff a week. That would transfer into $240,000 a week times 80 people, if you figure that they're all addicts. So say there's 2 of them, there's combinations, say there's 80. Stuff that they're selling is worth about 25% of what its value is actual in real life. So that's 25. So that's $960,000 a week in thefts that are happening. It's a lot of numbers. And yet there's nobody being responsible. It's just how it is. There's my 19 seconds left. I'll take some questions.
Thank you, Mr. Clark. Questions from anyone?
Yeah,
Councillor
one question.
Armstrong?
I know that you referenced this, but I think a lot of the issues that you're referring to actually are with the justice system.
Yep.
And I think perhaps maybe, you know, your energies could be used towards maybe starting a court watch or something that may help.
Absolutely. It is somewhat directed towards the justice system. However, all of these things a lot of them are happening around these properties, and we're in absolute support of this being deemed a nuisance property. Get the 15, 20 people out that are causing all this stuff, process them. But we don't have the power to do that. Council has the power, I believe, to influence. They can't dictate or tell, but you guys certainly can have the conversations in camera, out of camera, however it may be. But I think something needs to be done. Because as was stated before about, you know, the reason why I actually started this to come in this direction was because I was actually afraid for my kids, more so about the vigilantism that's starting to spark. The stuff that you read, like half of you guys I'm sure have read some of the stuff that's written on Better Nanaimo and stuff, and it's like, that's what I would actually be scared about. I wouldn't be so much scared about the people that are that are addicts who need help. Because I'm in 100% support of these people getting help. Where's the province and their money to support these people? Like, you can't just throw them all, a bunch of addicts together in one room and hope that it's just going to fix itself unless you plan on them taking each other out. That's the only way it's going to come down to it. Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Thank you.
Our next delegation is Diane Brown. Please. If it's an unpopular topic, you're not expected to jeer either. Ms. Brown.
Okay, my name is Diane Brown. For the past 20 years, I've lived on Townsite Road, 2 blocks from 250 Terminal, the site of the supportive housing known as Newcastle Place. It is my neighborhood. I'm here tonight as I feel we need a more balanced and reasoned approach to perceived problems with the housing. I live in the neighborhood and I walk by the site every day. I feel safe. I have not noticed any additional crime. Any residents I pass on the street respond to a friendly greeting and go about their business. Crime and fear, however, have existed throughout our neighborhood over the 2 decades that I've lived there. 2 years ago, it seemed to be an all-time high. Homes, marinas, boats, cars were broken into and vandalized. At our building, a surveillance camera was set up because people were breaking in. The camera showed that it was people living in the house next door. Residents have been observing an active drug trade from that house. I've also heard stories about people who live closer to 250 Terminal about the activities in the abandoned buildings that were on that site previously. My point is that crime in our neighborhood is not new. It didn't start when the supportive housing went in. It was already there. In fact, it's not limited to our neighborhood. We are in a serious situation throughout society with poverty, job losses, high rents, cutbacks in services by previous governments, and an opioid crisis. Many people in my neighborhood support the housing here, and they want it to be a success. Neighbors have taken clothing and supplies, cards, welcome bags, Christmas bags, and have advocated for these new neighbors at every opportunity. We want it to succeed, and it has already succeeded. 79 people at Newcastle Place are no longer living in wet, cold tents, suffering from pneumonia and colds, foot rot, and other harmful conditions that result from living on the streets or in a tent camp. Some are now employed. One young man moved in, took a shower, put on clean clothes, and got a part-time job the next day. Housing First works. Others are entering detox. Lives are changing. An older woman who had been at Tent City and is now living at Newcastle has completed the food safe certification and is applying to restaurants for work. Because of supports, she has regained her health, feels safe and supported, and is excited about meeting her own goals. A man in his 60s who started drinking after suffering an injury is now sober and beginning a detox program. The need to self-medicate is less when you have a warm place to sleep. In his words, "These people at Newcastle are angels. I feel like I have a bit of dignity back. And with a roof over my head, I just want to get my life back." He describes how the support and outreach workers listen and give support at any time of night or day. I urge Council to consider that this supportive housing was set up only last month. The people there need respect and time to do their work. It was set up hastily because it was a crisis. When residents moved in, it was rushed because the city was closing one port place and the people had nowhere else to go. It was a construction zone. The kitchen is still not completed. There's no common room yet and no gathering place. Look for ways that you can help instead of coming at it with a sledgehammer. There are still 200 people who are not housed and on the streets. Work with senior levels of government to provide more temporary housing, mental health and detox treatment centers. Work diligently to address zoning holdups that keeps affordable housing projects from going in. I understand it can be a 2-year process. Speed it up. Meet with the service providers and ask how this municipality can help be involved in the solution. These are our citizens, our neighbors, our family. Please. There will be many benefits. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, please, any questions for the delegation? Thank you, Ms. Brown. Heather and Edward Ambo. Good evening.
Hi there. How are you? First, we just want to say thank you very much for allowing us to speak so quickly. We found out this morning that we were going to speak tonight, so thank you very much for that. We were here last week and heard a lot about 250, and again, we've heard a lot about 250 Terminal, the temporary emergency housing, and we hadn't heard a lot coming from the Labio site. We currently live right across the street from that site behind Rock City Center, and we also manage those properties, 2 buildings behind there, as well as we're the caretakers of Rock City Center itself. I felt it was important, we felt it was important that we let people know exactly what has been happening to us on the ground. There's been an increase of crime. I sent all of you actually an email last week regarding every incident that's happened since Labio went in. I'm going to call it Nikeo because that's its official name, so since Nikeo went in on Labio. So we've been living in our area for 6 years now, same location. We used to have maybe 2 or 3 major incidents a year. And as you can see from the list, we're having at least 1, 2, 3 times an evening. People coming through our property, trying to get into vehicles, trying to get into our garden shed. They've gotten into our buildings. We're constantly doing things like cleaning up garbage, feces. We work for a company that's been in Nanaimo for 30 some odd years. They have about 400 rental units, and they've done everything they possibly can to try and make people in our community feel safer. For instance, putting up fencing, increased lighting. We started a recycling program because the city doesn't do recycling program for multi-residential properties. So we've started one inside our buildings so that people aren't going to the dumpsters as much, so there's no traffic flow, fences to prevent traffic flow. Every single night, though, we're having people that, I call them criminals, and the increase has been as a result of Nikeo going in. And my concern, our concerns are that we're landlords, the owner of our company, he's a landlord. They have responsibilities, we have responsibilities to our tenants. And then tenants, they have a responsibility as well when they're in their housing. And I understand that Nikeo is not designated a Tenancy Act property. However, I do know, because I'm on the Community Advisory Council meetings that get together with Pacifica Housing monthly. I'm part of that. I've been to their information sessions. I do know that they have requirements as residents that they have to follow. And what we're gathering tons of information from people in the community that are going out and following people to find out, are they living at Labio? Are they visitors of people at Labio? We have so much data and video and photos of people that are identified as the criminals that are victimizing the people in our community. And my concern is that Pacifica is not addressing the issue of the good neighbor policy. And I've tried to get in touch with the director of the Pacifica been in touch with the RCMP, with Constable O'Brien.
1 minute, Ms. Sambo.
Yep, okay. So our concern is that nobody's being responsible for the activity that's happening in our community through Pacifica. There have been identified criminals coming out of that facility, and we want to know what we can do on the ground level, community members, to help find a way to address these people specifically and then have them removed, because they're not making it better for the people that are living in there as well. People that are in the new programs, they want to just live comfortably and safely. And if they're being victimized, and we've heard they are being victimized by the criminals that are also living in Nikeo, that they're being victimized and they're not safe. And it's about all of us being safe together as a community. And it doesn't have to be like a debate, you're on one side, you're on the other. This is about making everybody safe that lives in the community.
Thank you, Ms. Hambo. Again, please. Any questions for the delegation?
I do.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you for your presentation. You noted that you're a member of the Community Action Committee. Do you find that that's an appropriate outlet for sharing the data and your experiences? I hear you saying that Pacifica is not as responsive as you had hoped, but do you feel like that forum in and of itself is a good place for neighbors to come together and talk about these difficult issues?
So there's only been one meeting, which was held in December. The next meeting is actually coming up this Thursday. But when I was there at that meeting, there weren't very many people there. Pacifica was there, 2 representatives. We actually had it at the Wet House on Uplands, which is a really nice facility, by the way, nothing compared to the other, as you mentioned. I shared all of the crime activity up to that date, to December 20th, including that morning. And I got a thank you for showing them that they needed an outreach program located in that area specifically to address the homeless there. I didn't get a very good response regarding, I didn't get a satisfactory response regarding the criminal activity and an acknowledgement that this is going on. And I think that's one of the important things about what's happening here and for people in the neighborhood is there's no acknowledgement from people that can make changes that this is happening and what we're experiencing. And I know that comes from a lot of people. So, so far it's too early to tell, but I wasn't satisfied with the reaction I got. Like they were discussing providing the people that live in the camp with reflectors to cross the highway at night. And yes, that's very important, but I mean, there are issues around criminal activity that's happening that weren't addressed and weren't acknowledged, and I think that's really important. I think there's a huge breakdown in communication as of yet.
Thank you.
Welcome. Councillor Turley.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. This is probably more addressed to staff if they have an answer. But when I was listening to your presentation, I thought I heard you say that you didn't get any response from Pacifica at some point. And then I thought I heard you say, I'm having trouble with hearing, so I apologize, but I thought I heard you say that you were able to present a portion of this document to somebody at Pacifica. So my question to staff is, do we have the actual name and contact information of the manager of that specific site?
I have it. I have it.
Oh, you have it, okay.
Mhm.
And he has this?
She does have it.
Oh, she, okay.
Yes. I sent her, as well as the day that I sent all of you this email, as well as the one that I presented at the advisory council meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I let her know twice now, as well as BC Housing, Heidi Hartman from BC Housing.
Good.
Because ultimately they work for her, and then, anyways.
And just as a follow-up, I think it's extremely important that where there are issues surrounding these 2 sites, that information goes to the people who are actually charged with the task of looking after them, because I have to profess I know, other than being a victim of crime, I don't know enough about it to be able to make some solid decisions. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. No one else? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Again, please. Ms. Snellgrove, do we have a seconder?
No, if Councillor Armstrong could repeat the motion, that would be helpful.
The motion was to explore the possibility, or was to get the information from police, city staff, and whatever other sources about activities that are occurring at the supportive housing units at 2020 Labio Road and 250 Terminal Avenue, and the information gathered would be based under the nuisance properties, City of Nanaimo's nuisance abatement and cost recovery bylaw.
Have a seconder, Councillor Gesselbrock?
And if I may speak to it?
Yes.
One of the concerns I have is that, especially when we're looking at, it's the numbers. You know, I worked very hard to bring in the supportive housing on Boundary as well as Uplands Walk when I was in the RCMP, because I do believe if they're done properly, they're good. I cannot find any research, and I hope people have it, to support 80 people in one place. The other issue that I have with the way the sites are set up is those with addictions need special counseling. Those with mental health need special counseling. And I don't believe that is happening. I also believe that the citizens' voices were never heard, especially when it comes, well, to both sites actually. They were never heard. There was never community engagement. And this is a council that you know, really stresses community engagement. We've heard from a large number of people about their concerns. So one of the ways that I see to address these concerns is to get the information that we would use, and I would go so far as to say if these weren't supportive houses, they probably already would have deemed a nuisance property. So what I would like to see is the information come to council and to all the citizens about exactly what is going on. That makes, what steps is Pacifica doing to address city's concerns? What steps are Island Crisis Care doing? Are they working with the police? How many times are the police going a day and how many cars are going? I was by there the other day and counted 5 cruisers. 5 hours later, I counted 3. So these are things that I think we need to hear so that we're basing information on facts. I'm not asking right now for this to be deemed a nuisance property. That was a term I came up with because I couldn't think of another way to show the citizens that we're listening. Like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I represent the property tax paying people of this community that pay my salary, that feel they don't have a voice. So the information, when it was come, I think it should be subject to a public meeting. And then based on that information, if there's sufficient information to deem it, I would probably make a motion at that time. I'm one person. It may not, the rest of council may not agree to it. But I think in fairness to the community that had no say in this and that needs to know what's going on, I would like to have a report generated from staff based on that available for the public to see. Thank you.
Thank you. Again, please. No clapping. Thank you. Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I prepared what I wanted to say based on the fact that I thought a motion was coming forward to actually work towards designating a nuisance property. It's a little bit different with the report. I'm not sure that we need a motion to get information or to obtain stats or data about it. So in this, I am not supporting the motion to designate these properties nuisance properties. I'm not comfortable with this label being given to these locations when the people have barely begun the transition to being housed, dry, and warm. I understand that residents have concerns, but there are many that are living in very close proximity that state their experiences have been positive, and there has not been any issues from them, and many of those contacting us are senior women. We need to give the housing a chance to be successful. No child at the age of 10 says, when I grow up, I want to be homeless, an addict, or a criminal. Nor is every homeless person an addict or a criminal. And I lost my place. Help me here, Cheryl. Go up here.
You should be able to maximize it. I can't see.
Here we go. I'm here. There are numerous reasons and unfortunate circumstances that a person finds themselves not being able to cope with what life has thrown at them. A car accident or a work accident that led from opiates being a treatment to full addiction. A landlord that sells a rental and no affordable housing can be located. The working poor with part-time jobs that are not able to save up a sufficient deposit and rent when no low-income housing is available. And I can't. Can you make that go down? Thank you. I also want to make this decision based on evidence and not on rumors. There have improvements that have been taken place, and I'm sure we're going to continue to improve for security and safety, but improvements for the residents, a community kitchen, and a living space. They need to know this is a home on a pathway to better living. Letters from our citizens have pointed out this continual success. I, for one, am looking for us to all work together as a community. I represent all citizens of this city, and I want us to all work together to build a better life for all of us. At this time, I cannot support the motion.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I'm admittedly a little confused because the motion that we were given to consider is a little bit different than the motion as it was presented this evening. I came in prepared to speak against the motion. I believe I'm still in that position. I fully support a comprehensive report coming to council and to the public that includes everything that you've mentioned, Councillor Armstrong. However, any notion or any move towards designating these two properties as nuisance at this point feels heavy-handed. It feels like it's too soon. I feel that Discontent City was Nanaimo's quite probable. It was our largest social issue to date, and resolving that and dismantling that is going to take time and compassion and effort. And that is not to dismiss the concerns of the neighbors, which are valid, and I really appreciate hearing them. But I think as we try to kind of police our way out of this, we're just going to get further into a knot of creating trenches of positions. So I'm not entirely clear what the motion is, but if it has anything to do with a nuisance property, I do not support it.
Thank you, Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Regarding the motion, I guess I'm fortunate enough that I was away for 2 weeks, so I didn't hear what happened before, but so I'm going in with an unbiased opinion. I understand, I believe what Councillor Armstrong's motion is. However, I'd be much more comfortable if we included the terms trends rather than stats, because if it did you put trends? Sorry, I didn't hear that. So. Oh, you're willing to? Okay, that'd be great, because we've heard from some people that things are changing at these sites, and you know, when you're doing research, it's a good idea to look at the trends as opposed to just black and white stats. The other reason I think it's advisable to get these figures and trends prior to making a decision one way or the other is that this isn't a black and white issue. It's a really multifaceted issue, and I had a long discussion about a year ago with one of the head gardeners in the city, and she told me that they find needles everywhere in the city. It's not just downtown, it's not just here, it's not just there, it's everywhere, to the point where they no longer send out single staff work crews. It's always at least two, because they're concerned about, you know, them getting stuck. So it's a serious issue, and I think anything that will help bring enlightenment to it for a solution, I think is important. So if the word trends is in there, then I'm in support. So.
Thank you, Councillor Shirley. Councillor Gusselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, I think this council is all in agreement that everyone in this community deserves to feel safe and secure. I know there's a lot of frustration around crime. I feel similar frustration. I've been broken into, actually during the election campaign. I had $3,000 worth of my work chainsaw stolen. And, you know, once a month usually there's reports of somebody doing the tour through our neighborhood in the South End, checking on doors. And that is really frustrating, and it's unsettling, and I can definitely empathize with how people are feeling with that. I'm also hearing from a lot of people that there is an intention to find solutions, and one thing I know about this council and about this community is that that's what we got to stay focused on, is finding solutions. And the most important message that I want to send out to the community and the decisions I'm making on this is one that we have to focus on collaboration. We need to collaborate with different levels of government. We need to collaborate with all the organizations that are focused on this issue, and we have to work together and collaborate with each other, because this situation with addictions and the crime involved, it's a very big one, and we can't go it alone and create situations of conflict. So for myself, with the notice of motion, around nuisance property, I'm not willing to do anything that's going to create an adversarial situation with the service providers at these sites, with the province. It is a tool, and I definitely, it rings with the frustration around the crime. So I do support getting the information on different trends, so that council can sit down and have a very fulsome discussion on these issues and be really pragmatic on what's the best strategy going forward. We need a long-term solution. We got to keep in mind that these sites are temporary. They are temporary sites because, having a tent city was even worse. And we need to progress to a situation where we can at least mitigate the impacts of the addiction and crime situation, Besserer City, and hopefully we can get together as a community and lobby very hard on changes to how much funding and resources we're putting towards detox, rehabilitation, and the rules around crime. It is insane that to deal with an addiction issue, individuals have to steal large amounts of money from the community to pay for this, and it creates a festering sore. And I really hope that we can advocate to look at how we're dealing with this on a whole and treat addictions as a very serious, life-threatening illness that it is. So I'm in support of getting more information, and won't take it any further than that in terms, I have reservations as labeling these as a nuisance property because it may be not sending the message of collaboration that I think we do.
Thank you. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I agree with Councillor Ben and Gasbreck. Sorry, that's for sure. I really empathize with the folks in the community who are having these problems. And I truly believe that the changes that we're undertaking right now at both these facilities will eventually make things better for the neighborhood. I think this motion is sending a wrong message to the very people in our province who are willing and unable to spend the money on affordable housing and housing in our community. This Nanaimo has a history of not cooperating with the provincial government, and as a result, we are in the position we are now. So I think we need to send a message to the province that we're willing to cooperate. We realize that we have an emergency here, and these are just shelters. They are not housing. So we need to spend our time and work towards getting the housing that is needed in our community, and we need to do that with the provincial government. I think this motion sends the wrong message to those people. And I really, really want us to spend the time and energy in implementing our strategy on homelessness, that we have a document that's been passed by the last council, and we should be spending all our time and energy to get that thing on the ground, because solving the problem will fix our neighborhoods. Spreading them around or calling them nuisance won't. We need to solve the problem. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Brown.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I too cannot support this motion as is, because for me it doesn't answer two sort of fundamental questions. How does it benefit the neighborhood, and how does it benefit Nanaimo long term? Mr. Clark, who spoke tonight, also last week spoke about action, and while I appreciate the intention behind this motion, I believe it is the illusion of action. If the question of something that comes before council of how do we mitigate the impacts on the neighborhood and how do we help resource long-term solutions, it absolutely would have my full support. I'm just not sure this motion as is captures that.
Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, others have expressed similar thoughts, but I need to say what I feel on this, and it's a tough one, and I think part of my indecision at the moment stems from the wording of the motion. If this was a motion to declare these properties as nuisance properties, I would not support it. Not because I like what's going on in those communities, but because, as others have said, I think that sends a wrong message. We need to be prepared to work with the provincial government to get more supportive funding. We need to work with the service providers to improve how they're offering their services. So I'm not ready to go down that road yet. I think that is premature, and I would not support it. However, I'm hearing tonight that the motion has changed slightly to one where we're simply gathering information. I'm a person that likes to make decisions based on as much information as possible, and so I believe, pending further discussion from my fellow councillors, I would be prepared to support the motion simply in terms of gathering data and information about the situation. But I want to make it clear that I believe the solution to this in the long term is not attacking our partners, but in working with them and lobbying for more supports and working with Pacifica and Crisis Care in saying, how can we together make things better and solve the problems in these neighborhoods? So this is a tough one, and I am torn on this. I think from what I've heard to this point, I would be prepared to support this motion only in terms of gathering more information. Thank you.
Ms. Snellgrove.
Council is voting on, and I just need some clarification from Councillor Armstrong. So I'm going to read out the motion as I have it, and if you could let me know if there are any changes. So that council directs staff to prepare a report for an open council meeting with information gathered from the police and service providers regarding the activities and trends occurring at 250 Terminal Avenue and 2020 Labio Road, and that information be based on nuisance abatement and cost recovery bylaw 2003 number 5645.
Because I'm aware that the chamber has a report that will be coming to council.
Okay. Is that how council understood the motion?
It appears it is.
Okay.
Councillor Turley.
I don't need to, the word trend was in there, so I'm fine.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm still unclear. The report makes a lot of sense to me, but how we go from the report and how we're using that to talk about a nuisance property is unclear to me. So I'm looking to my colleagues, to perhaps Councillor Armstrong, to clarify that for me, because my vote in this will depend on whether those are separate or together.
The nuisance bylaw, and working with them, and staff can correct me if I'm wrong, gives the city the power to work with the service providers. Certain steps have to be made in order before we would deem it a nuisance property, and that would entail the service providers work with city staff, they work with bylaws, they work with police, so there's a lot of issues that would be addressed before it ever made it to a nuisance bylaw. Like to a designation where we're actually voting on that. My motion is based on that, is based on the fact that, and correct me please, Jake, or Mr. If I'm wrong, in order for us to get reports, we just can't ask for reports willy-nilly. There's got to be a basis for it. So one of the things that I was looking at is how do I get a report that will address the issues that are said by the citizens from both sides and the indifference. And one of the ways to me to do it was through the nuisance bylaw, because that's the only way I could think of that I could get the report that would address the concerns by everybody. Therefore, all the stakeholders, and by that, I'm also looking at ambulance, how many times are they there? How many times is fire there? You know, the good things that are happening. I've heard from residents myself that they're fearful because of certain individuals are there. So if we were ever to get to the nuisance part, like if it was deemed, then that's when they would have the power to remove those individuals. So it's actually working with the city to create solutions. And I think
I'd like
Jake's
to
been,
go to-
Mr. Rudolph's been waiting to speak.
Yes, and I was just going to say, let's hear from Mr. Rudolph.
I may actually confuse this a little more, but just a question and maybe some comments about process. So as council is aware, we've been sequentially going through a series of briefings and discussions and committees of the whole, which are all public, and we are scheduled to have one of those in early February on the subject of homelessness, housing, and related topics. So that is not in a formal council meeting. That is actually at a workshop forum where we're actually getting completely familiar with all the documents, some of the documents that have been mentioned here tonight. So that's one piece of this. So we certainly can be reporting back to a council meeting on this as well, but you are already scheduled to be dealing with the broader subject, because we are in this for the long haul in terms of the subject matter of homelessness and housing and building a strong foundation moving forward. The other piece of this is I had prepared through consultation with some of the other departments and staff just a little bit of information as an interim update, which I think if I would be permitted to share that particularly on the terminal site, just so that it's clear. And some of that information has been shared already this evening, and it's quite impressive with the level of understanding and information that the neighborhoods do have, and that's good. So if I might just comment a little bit. So as council is aware, both of these projects, and the one on terminal is specifically, they're under the guise of guidance of the BC Housing and our provincial responsibility. The contractor is a report directly to and has been awarded by BC Housing. The entire enterprise and all the funding that's gone into building the infrastructure for this facility and the operating dollars have been investments by BC Housing in both sites, and this one in particular. So staff have had a continuous and very productive at a staff level working relationship with BC Housing, starting with the summer and when we had to work very closely with them on the tent city process and trying to resolve that. On the terminal property, we are meeting through either on the phone or in person on a very regular basis. I was personally involved in 2 meetings last week with BC Housing, right up to the vice president. They're taking this very seriously, and they're spending a lot of time to try to remedy and address many of the concerns that are being expressed. There were a number of deficiencies with the sites as they were rolled out. That was partly because they were done so quickly, and they had to meet the deadline imposed by the courts to have the Tent City site closed. And they promised that they would deliver the trailers to those 2 sites, and they did that. Where they had some challenges was getting hydro and a lot of the contractors to finish the work. So there were deficiencies, and some of those have been noted, and they've not been, until just this week, been completed, including the kitchen, including locks of the doors, including the fence, the gates, the lights around the perimeter, issues around security, which are being improved as we speak, and all those types of things. They are allowing and encouraging service providers in on the site and terminal. I was told today that Island Health is there 5 days a week on site, providing services to residents. So they're still working through the logistics of some of the building infrastructure, but that is taking place. In speaking with the RCMP, and the RCMP are heavily invested in this neighborhood and in this project. They've conducted a crime prevention through environmental design review of this, which is called a CEPTED, which is a significant thing. They've conducted training for the security companies. They've conducted training for the social workers. The bike squad is at the site multiple times a day and in the neighborhood. I'm advised by the officer in charge that plainclothes officers are in the vicinity of this project on a regular basis. The RCMP are participating on the committee that's been struck for the terminal project and the other one, and they are committed to something that is just being launched, is a tri-party pilot project of the RCMP, the bylaw department, and outreach workers to work collaboratively in and around the project to deal with issues. So that's a summary that was provided to me by the officer in charge of some of the activities that the RCMP are dealing with in the neighborhood. One of the final comments, and this has been raised this evening, is that the police did admit that one of the fundamental problems and challenges that we have is in terms of some of the criminal activity that's been going on in the city as we are dealing with mental health and addictions problems. So it is, again, the health responsibility as a provincial government responsibility, as is housing. And the municipality is faced with the challenge of trying to deal with many of these issues in this neighborhood, in both neighborhoods, and actually throughout the city. As you're aware, we've had a number of and we can predict that the concerns in many of our parks and that type of thing will be going on. We were aware that there's literally dozens of other camping locations throughout the municipality, and that's not new news. That's information that you're aware of. So it's a big picture problem. There are housing strategies and homeless strategies in place. We'd like to work through that with council in the bigger picture. I realize that there's two issues that are particularly of concern at this time. I just wanted to get a bit of communication out there, is that the city at the staff level, and I know the mayor himself has told me that he's spoken with the minister on a number of occasions about that, we're all working very hard to address many of these problems in these locations, and the only way to go is to get better, and I think we're hopeful that the efforts that are going in will make a difference. So this is an interim update, and I'm not asking but I guess the second piece is seeking your guidance as to how you would like to handle this, in terms of knowing that you're looking for information that might come back to council, but also will be in a position to give you additional information at our workshop scheduled for February.
Thank you, Mr. Rudolph. Sorry, but yes, please.
So that just does go to my point, resources that are tied up with this. Like, we're hearing that there's 3 or 4 there every day. So that's where my concern comes in, is that a lot of our police resources are being spent there, and it's coming out of our taxpayers' dollars, to the point where people, like a lot of people are calling, and they're not getting responses from the police, which we've heard. And those are things I want to see from this report, to see exactly how much of our resources and time are being spent there. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. I, too, don't have a problem with getting a report from staff on anything, literally. But when Councillor Armstrong referred to this bylaw, it's probably one of the smaller bylaws we have, and it specifically deals with fining property owners and/or people on the property for too many calls from the police. And it does not talk about dealing with agencies. It does not talk about anything about trying to mitigate and working with other organizations. It's specifically a fining bylaw. And I really think we're sending the wrong message. And if we were to pass this motion, because it has it tagged on the end. Honestly, I don't even see it solving any issues. Like, if we were to declare it a nuisance property, what are we going to do? Start fining Island Crisis Care? I mean, they're trying to solve the problem, not create it. That's why I still cannot support this motion. Sorry.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you. I want to follow up on something Councillor Armstrong said, and that was that what I heard you say is that the bylaw is a pathway for getting this information. So if we say that we are possibly working towards a nuisance property designation, that's going to allow us to connect with agencies and get their information, et cetera, et cetera. And so I guess my question for staff would be, is that your experience? Do we need to go down that pathway of potentially declaring a nuisance property in order to get that information to have a fulsome discussion? My experience has been no.
Okay, Your Worship, through to Councillor Hemmons, I've asked Chief Fry to be prepared to clarify the nuisance bylaw and speak to our experience with that, which I think would be helpful at this stage, and any remarks she might have on that, because she has oversight over the bylaw department.
Chief Fry, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the nuisance abatement and property bylaw, exactly correct that it is a small bylaw, but they do have a policy that they follow to do it. And generally speaking, The bylaw or the nuisance properties are brought forward at the request of the RCMP after they have attended a property on so many occurrences. From that, they then submit the request through the bylaws department, and they put it on this list that meets monthly. We currently have 2 designated deemed nuisance properties in our city, and there's 14 on a watch. And with that watch, they involve social services, bylaws, fire, electrical inspectors for safety issues within the hall, bylaws, and RCMP. They can then begin working with the property owners, which the city is currently doing. So I'm not sure what the difference would make in order to mitigate and remediate any problems that they do seem are occurring. If the property owner is not working towards solutions, then they get a mandatory inspection of the property. Currently, we already have free access to the property, and we can do inspections on that property at any given time because it is not a single-family dwelling, so we don't need a court order to go and do an inspection on the property. BC Housing and the operators do let the resources in of the fire service and bylaw services and police at any time. When it goes through the process, if it's deemed that the solutions aren't remediated or getting any better, we bring it before council to deem it or have a resolution that it is a nuisance property. If that's council's direction at that point in time, then we can start billing for attendance at the incident. So it either gets attended or billed to the owner of the land, the occupier of the land, or an individual. It doesn't mean that you can close it down because of that. It's simply billing for services that's costing the city's services for going there. So for example, in the appendix, if a firefighter or an inspector goes, it might be $40 an hour for his attendance to go there. If he's there for half an hour, it's $22. So the teeth in that bylaw are not as strong as obtaining potentially a request for a report to council might be simple enough and something that council could request of staff. Does that help?
Thank you, Chief Fry. Councillor Hemmons.
Oh, no, sorry.
Sorry, Councillor Kesselbrock.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the chair, I appreciate the clarification on the bylaw, and I'm not fully convinced that by going down this route and getting info on this designation, if it'll even provide the legal tool that's right for this type of job. I think right now we have access. We are working quite closely with the service providers, with the police, and I think that this council is extremely committed to making sure that the mitigating steps to making this place as safe as possible in this interim period, as we're working very hard to have a different strategy than these 2 temporary locations. I don't think we're going to benefit from that, and the collaboration is where we really do need focus. I really do appreciate the intention of Councillor Armstrong, and really hear the need that we must take, the frustrations about the crime very seriously in the community and demonstrate that we are taking action and be giving the public and the community the information of what steps are being taken and the strategy. However, potentially, I don't believe that this tool, the nuisance property going down this route, is going to meet that need thing, and potentially could send the message that the wrong message about how we want to work with our partners and have it confused. So thank you.
Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just going to be real quick. I've always been brought up to believe that information is gold, and I don't believe Councillor Bonner's suggestion that it's sending the wrong message is correct. I think it's sending the message that the City of Nanaimo is concerned about this situation, wants to improve it, and I'm sure the people providing the services would consider that good information.
Councillor Thorpe.
Just when you thought the list was ended. Thank you, Your Worship. Good discussion, and I think we all share some of the same mixed emotions on this and some of the frustrations, and believe me, I can speak, I think, for all of council and say that we do understand the concerns of our community in terms of public safety and the crime that people are observing. If I may, through you, Your Worship, to Councillor Armstrong, the sticking point for me is now the inclusion, actually, of nuisance property in this motion. I support, as Councillor Turley said a minute ago, getting information. If I really thought this was leading us or going to lead us, or the intent was to lead us towards nuisance property, I do not feel that that is an effective route to go. I don't think that would solve anything. It might seem or be seen by some as us taking action, but I don't believe it would result in any concrete action to solve the situation. So I'm wondering if there's a chance you could, on the fly, consider rewording your motion to simply gain council more information from all sources about the background of what's happening, without sort of predetermining where we might go with it.
Councillor Armstrong.
I think part of my thought process was, and please staff correct me if I'm wrong, was that it would give the service providers a tool to ensure that those that were causing the problems were gone.
Please.
If I can go through to staff for that clarification, because that was my understanding, having sat through the other nuisance property, whatever, that it can give them a tool to say, you know, like, you're the person that's causing problems. We've got this, we may have this delegation because of you. Can they then remove that individual based on that?
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, maybe what I would say is that and I think it's mentioned, I think you heard a delegation here earlier this evening, that as part of the tenancy, each tenant signed an agreement. It's not under the tenancy branch, but they did sign an agreement with conditions of their conduct. So if there's someone who's living at either of the facilities and are in violation of that agreement that they signed, then they could be asked to leave by the service provider.
Okay, thank you.
I have listened carefully to everything everyone had to say tonight. I am conscious of the fact that the solutions to the problems exemplified by the need for supportive housing are beyond both the jurisdiction and the financial resources of this community. This is not a civic responsibility per se, although it has become practice in British Columbia over the last few years for communities to step up to the plate and provide land in some form in order to ensure that housing, whether it be supportive housing or generally low-cost housing, whatever the case may be, is in fact available. I remember then Minister Coleman, who had the housing portfolio for the previous government for a number of years, complaining with no small amount of bitterness that he found it almost impossible in many communities to get municipal governments to cooperate with the necessary zoning to ensure that supportive housing and low-cost housing was built. We have a problem in this community that is common to every community across this province. The solution is not going to come from us, and it's only not going to come quickly. You know, some are fond of quoting a line in the Bible, "The poor will always be with us." That may be true, but we are seeing the poor in far more significant numbers in the last few decades than we have in my lifetime. I remember British Columbia where if you wanted to see street poverty, you would go to the downtown east side and it was confined there. I can now go to any community in the province of British Columbia and find street poverty. I note with interest, and this is not a criticism, believe me, and I'm cherry-picking to some extent the document we received tonight, Country Club Madrona Green Criminal Activity Log, which includes some serious allegations about breaking and entering and other things, but it also includes people being asked, a male being camping out between dumpsters, being asked to move along. I'm reminded of the words of Anatole France, the great French philosopher and writer, who said, "The law in its majestic equality forbids the rich as well as the poor to steal bread," what is it, to beg in the streets, to steal bread, and to sleep under bridges. I am completely sympathetic to those people who have been victimized by the crime that has occurred around some of these facilities, as it has occurred to many of our citizens across this city for some time. My own family has been a victim of crime in decades past. I have said that before publicly, and I'm appreciative of what that means to people, and the fear expressed by Mr. McDonald when he brought his daughter and granddaughter here last week and how they feel. I'm also conscious of the fact that we had a letter writer from someone who lives on Stewart Avenue, not very far from 250 Terminal Avenue, who claims, and I have no reason to doubt this, but I say claims because I have no proof per se, claims to be 81 years old and still walks her dog at night and doesn't worry about what happens in the neighborhood. I appreciate the passion that Councillor Armstrong in particular, who spent a lifetime in law enforcement, brings to this debate. And I'm conscious of where her intentions come from with her remarks tonight and remarks made before about bringing forward this motion respecting perhaps declaring this a nuisance property. However, as Councillor Bonner has reminded us, and as the senior part in the Fermi article too reminded me, you should always go to the statute before you start asking questions. I think there is a commonly held belief in this community right now that somehow the nuisance bylaw would give us an effective tool to deal with the behaviors of some individuals, not all, who occupy these sites, or indeed occupy any residents in this community, give us a tool to deal effectively with those behaviors. I, for one, cannot accept, understand, or believe that fining two nonprofit agencies, Pacifica Housing or the Island Crisis Care Society, is an effective way to deal with this. I find it hard to believe we can declare ourselves, as the owners of the Labio site, someone subject to the fining. Are we going to fine the individuals occupying the site who can be pointed out to be guilty of this? We are dealing with a population that by definition is on social assistance at best, and only recently so, because as many people don't appreciate, those who were occupying the Tent City site, which was such a disturbance to this community and such a source of criticism and community concern, did not in fact receive the housing allowance provided for in social assistance because they did not have a recognized address, and that is the way the policy works. Mr. Rudolph has pointed out tonight quite wisely that we will have a significant report given to this council by various people in a matter of a few weeks. I think it's fair to say, and acknowledged by some of those who've expressed their concern both tonight and last week, that there are improvements being made to how both these sites are managed, both in terms of the resources that are being put in place, the training given to people to deal with those who are occupying these sites. And Councillor Armstrong is quite right. In a perfect world, you would not have 80 people in a site like this. You wouldn't. There's no question about that. But as Ms. Brown pointed out tonight as well, you have people now who are not developing what used to be called trench foot. And as we've just passed the 100th anniversary of the ending of the Great War, when thousands of people suffered trench foot in defense of the British Empire and what was not then its Commonwealth, just its empire, it strikes me as particularly disturbing that so many people in our community would suffer serious health issues because of what is essentially something related to poverty, to their addictions, to their mental health issues, or in some cases, and this is, we have started to focus so much on the mental health and addiction issues that we've forgotten that there are occupants of these facilities who are simply people who are poor. I defy anyone in this audience to tell me that you will rent out a room in your house for $375 a month, which is the housing allowance provided by social assistance. I have gone on longer than I intended, and forgive me, but I have spent a lifetime, as did former Councillor Brennan, who served in this council for so long, believing in the cause of social and economic justice. I do not believe for one moment tonight that in supporting this motion, given that it is tied to the nuisance bylaw, that we will advance the cause, which is a solution to this, a reduction in crime, and the restoration of the right of every citizen in this community to feel safe in their homes and to feel safe on their streets. I do not believe for a moment that in voting for this motion, we will achieve that. I am satisfied that the hardworking city staff who continue to work with no small degree of frustration with the very difficult situation that has occurred over the last couple of months, I have no doubt that they will give us an appropriate report regardless of whether a motion is passed tonight. So, with great respect, I cannot support the motion because by implication it suggests that we can somehow move to a solution with declaring either of these properties a nuisance property. It would be, to me, a political out that may give comfort to those who think there is a solution in declaring these properties a nuisance property, when in fact, based on what I have heard from staff, based on the wording of the bylaw, it will not achieve that effect at all. As Councillor Bonner pointed out, and Councillor Brown, we have a provincial government, and I'm not defending it, but a provincial government that has committed resources to this community. It has happened in a way that I was criticized, and I must tell you, in a conversation with the minister herself, for using the term clumsily, and I'm happy to admit it. Solutions that were rolled out in a way that have not enhanced the prospects of future community support for low-cost housing and low-barrier housing or supportive housing or any language you want to use. But having said all that, supporting this motion will not get us there. I, for one, will not support the motion. I look forward to the report from staff. I look forward to better days in Nanaimo. I look forward to reports that both the operators of these facilities and the provincial government and everyone has come together, and particularly the citizens who are most affected by both these sites community have come together to try and make this work. And so that we can be seen as partners in moving towards solutions which are not going to happen overnight, just as this problem did not occur overnight. I think I apologized at least a half an hour ago for going on too long, so forgive me, but thank you. I see no further speakers. All those in favor of the motion? Opposed? Motion defeated. No clapping, please. Ms. Snellgrove, we have question period now.
We did miss our 9 p.m. recess, so if council would like, we could take a 9 p.m. recess.
I think there might, let's take a 5-minute recess so that everyone can use the facilities if necessary or whatever else may be appropriate.
There will be a new decorum statement read out at the start of each meeting to ensure proper decorum is taking place and to assist the chair in his duties. So the proper rules of order and the decorum will be as follows. There will be only one speaker at a time that will have the floor as directed by the chair of the meeting. There will be no interruptions or call-out comments while another person has the floor. Anyone speaking out without having been acknowledged by the chair will be found out of order. If that person does not refrain from speaking without having been acknowledged by the chair, then he or she will be required to leave. For the members of the public speaking, the comments need to be respectful and constructive. Discriminatory or defamatory comments or comments that are in the nature of harassment will not be tolerated, and anyone engaging in such communications will be found out of order. Some examples of behavior that won't be tolerated at a council meeting are as follows. 1. Harassment. In terms of comments about city employees, employees of the City of Nanaimo have a right not to be subjected to discriminatory or defamatory comments or personal attacks against their competency or character. All speakers must refrain from such comments about identifiable staff. Comments should be limited to issues regarding the city's policies or operations. Number 2. Section 7 of the Human Rights Code prohibits a discriminatory publication because of race, color, ancestry, place of origin, religion, marital status, family status, physical or mental disability, sex, sexual orientation, gender identity or expression, or age. Discriminatory comments will not be tolerated. Number 3, defamation is publication about a person that tends to hurt that person's reputation. Defamatory comments will not be tolerated. Please stick to known facts and keep the dialogue respectful and constructive.
Are you tired of dragging the garbage out? They just don't make them like they used to. It's a saying that doesn't really apply to garbage cans. Yes, young man, you seem ready for a new garbage and recycling experience. Take a look at the new green, blue, and black carts right behind you. Yes, exactly. Oh, I see your confusion. I can fix it. Go ahead, give them a try. Pretty easy to roll, right? Did you know that a set of these carts will be delivered to every house in Nanaimo as a part of the new Sort, Toss, Roll program? It's designed to make it easy for you to sort your waste, toss it into the correct cart, and roll it to the curb.
3 carts will be assigned to your home, but the city actually owns them. This way, the city will maintain responsibility for repairing and replacing the carts when it's needed.
Wow, you really are happy about this. There are a few things you need to know before you start wheeling your carts to the curb. Are you ready? Great, let's get ready to sort, toss, roll.
Yeah!
Did you think that this was a silent video? Well, now that you've found your voice, why don't you narrate this next bit?
The new Sort, Toss, Roll automated curbside collection program is coming to Nanaimo in 2 phases. Phase 1 is being rolled out to central Nanaimo now. Sort, Toss, Roll will come to the rest of Nanaimo in the summer of 2018. Carts will be delivered and placed at the end of your driveway, yard, or curbside. This is how you should place your carts on collection days. An information package will be left for you, further introducing you to the new program. with information spanning from instructions on how to place your cart on different types of streets to options for cart upsizing, or details on what goes into each cart.
Wow, you really know your stuff. Tell me, why are there 3 colors of carts?
Well, this one is for organics, this one is for garbage, and this blue one over here is for any recyclables.
Very good. Now, what goes into the blue recycling cart?
Cardboard, plastic containers, milk jugs, cans, or anything that used to go into the yellow recycling bags.
Now, David, what goes into the green cart?
The green cart is for your organics. Any compostable food, pizza boxes, or napkins. Anything that used to go into the old organics bin.
And
what?
I'll give you a hint.
Yard clippings.
Yes, the new green cart has plenty of room for grass and weeds. Now, what about the black cart?
Easy. That one is for garbage. Any waste that can't be composted or recycled. But what if the carts aren't big enough?
Well, the city of Nanaimo has an exchange program in place. Homes that have more demand for recycling and household waste can upsize their carts. That reminds me, anyone that has questions about the Sort Toss Roll program can call the hotline or visit our webpage.
The standard 240-litre blue recycling cart can hold 3 times the amount of recyclables as your yellow bag, and it won't blow away in the wind. The 120-litre green cart can hold 3 times as much as your old green bin, and the 120-litre black bin is about the size of 1.5 garbage bags. And now, you won't even need to buy those black garbage bags.
Are you going to get that?
I probably should. Take over for a bit, will you?
Okay.
Excellent. Thanks.
Hang on. Let's try this. Sort Toss Roll is a new way of doing away with waste. New trucks are a big part of the program and come equipped with an automated arm to lift, dump, and replace the carts on collection day. The trucks are efficient. Each truck has 2 compartments and can pick up both your weekly organics and your recycling or garbage. They are also fueled by compressed natural gas, so they are green too. And the trucks are safe. Our waste collectors no longer need to lift the cans manually. This means far less injuries on the job and happier workers. The new trucks are awesome. The arms can reach out up to 10 feet to pick up the carts. It is important you place them properly on collection day though, to make sure that your waste and recycling can be picked up. How you place your carts depends largely on the type of street your home is on. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk divided and set in from the curb, place your carts like this. If your street looks like this, with a sidewalk and a curb as one, place your carts like this. If your street doesn't have a sidewalk or curb, place your carts like this at the end of your driveway. And finally, if you have a curbed sidewalk but can't place your carts behind the sidewalk because of a wall, ditch, or fence, place your carts like this in front of the curb. Always remember to place your carts 1 meter apart to allow room for the automated arm, and point the arrow on your cart legs towards the street. In the occasional neighborhood, there are other factors that may affect how you can place your carts, such as street parking or steep hills. The City of Nanaimo will find a collection solution for every situation. It may not look like it, but there's technology in the carts. Each cart has a digital ID tag, which tells the truck which house it belongs to and whether it's the recycling, organics, or waste cart, so that it gets dumped to the right compartment at pickup.
Contamination happens when things that can't get recycled get tossed into the blue cart. Styrofoam, plastic bags and glass can't be accepted at the curb. The automated sorting machine at the recycling facility cannot process them. This means contaminated loads of recycling end up being sent to landfill. So do your part and recycle smart.
Sort Toss Roll. It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
I was going to say that.
Go ahead then.
It's easy, efficient, green, clean, and safe.
That about sums it up.
David, time for dinner.
Don't worry, we've covered a lot today, and if people want to learn more about Sort Toss Roll,
call the hotline, 250-756-5390.
Come on, David.
I've got to go.
What was that number again?
250-756-5390.
I believe it's Ken Clark, and the agenda item is safety. And I would remind every questioner, it is question period. So ask a question, please. Statements were earlier.
I will ask a question with a little bit of knowledge attached to it that will help people answer the question. So I'm assuming that no one on this council has ever had their house invaded. While you're in it? While you're in it?
Not in it.
Okay,
No.
anyone put up their hands if they've had their house invaded while someone's been in it? Yeah, I have. My ex-wife was pregnant, had someone stand over our bed, and I wonder what I was supposed to do if I didn't think it was a bad dream. But I guess that doesn't matter because we just all sold Nanaimo up the river 10 minutes ago, so that is what it is. So the question is, what can we do to change the way the social economic is in our town? How can we change the way developments are done so that we can have more developments in our process that have more than just less than the bare minimum? So the question is how can we make changes in our bylaws so that we don't have a 20-minute negotiation over a pride parade and we have a 20-minute negotiation over a development project that should probably lean more towards 24 units, maybe 20% of those units being affordable housing, because quite frankly that is our problem, is affordable housing, and yet even when that was happening the negotiation was pretty quick and it wasn't really focused directly on what we are. So I do resort back to my conversation that I did have last week, and I want to try to be as respectful to this as possible, but it's
Again, Mr. Clark, with great respect, you've sort of half asked a question and then not asked a question. So what is your question, please?
how can we, as a community, give you guys the tools so that we may have more affordable housing in our community? Because as we've all just experienced, something that's should be more stressed is not, so.
I think I can answer that fairly simply. This community can have more affordable housing if the city is prepared to zone lands appropriately, which would generally comes with obviously a neighborhood process and bylaws and all those things, and someone is prepared to pay for that housing. That's how it will happen.
I brought 2 developments to the table 2 years ago, and they were both squished for non-affordable housing.
I'm sorry, could you repeat yourself?
I brought 2 developments to the table about 2 or 3 years ago, and both of them were squished for non-affordable housing.
I can't comment on what may have happened a few years ago. I'm going to presume you were prepared to build housing that would rent out at some rental, and there would have to be market rents paid, correct? Well, with great respect, that's not unaffordable housing. I appreciate your question tonight, but we've got 9 more people to go.
Perfect. Thank you very much
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Heather Ambo.
Hi again. So I sort of have a mini question, first of all. Was Pacifica Housing contacted regarding providing information like you got from 250 Terminal to provide that much detailed information about what's been happening in the process?
Mr. Rudolph.
The issue for tonight was Terminal, in my mind. Pacifica, I believe there's a neighborhood meeting this week. There will be a delegation next week, is my understanding, that is coming to council. So I would have been in a position to give a similar level of detail for next week's meeting, but I wasn't prepared today. I was more focused on the Terminal property. So next week.
Okay, awesome, thank you. Just quickly, because I was wondering if they were contacted. And my other question is, the company that I work for was actually just approved for the program with the housing that is 10% below market rent. They're the first property awarded this project that's happening on Bowen and Pride. And So coming from a landlord perspective in a community and where I work, I've given you lots of information regarding what's actually happening. So what are we supposed to do now? Because I just don't know what we're supposed to do. You brought up about removing, asking 2 people to remove themselves from between the dumpsters. That happens to actually be on the property that we live at. We have many seniors in our property that pass that location all the time. And you know what? My husband is actually assaulted, requesting that that gentleman move along his way. So as people that are dealing with this 2-3 times a night, I sit up at night and watch the people so I can report to the RCMP.
But Ms. Ambrose, I think you asked a question, and we're prepared to answer. What are we supposed to do? You are supposed to do, unfortunately, like every one of us in the city who thinks they've been a victim of crime, you are to report that crime. And hopefully the police will be responsive, which is their duty to be responsive to it. Is the city police, the RCMP, overwhelmed with reports? Might well be, and I'm sure I'll hear from Superintendent Miller in the next week or two as we await reports from the police to see what is happening out there. But that's all any of us can do.
Just report it to the police.
You can report it to the police, you can take measures, you can do block watch, there are a number of things like that. But look, I can't, and you know full well, this council cannot keep you safe any more than I expect this community to keep me safe tonight when I go home. I wish it was a perfect world, but solving the issues of crime over time and offering you complete protection is not something within either the jurisdiction or the ability of this council to offer you. And I appreciate the frustration you're expressing here tonight, but asking me a question like that or asking this council to give you an answer, you know you're not going to get an answer because we can't give you the kind of answer that would keep you safe and protected. And I wish we could, but we can't.
Just to acknowledge that it is a legitimate question, really. So thank you.
Mr. Gorey, or Gorfie.
Good evening. My name is Daryl Jerfy. I live on Vancouver Avenue. Thanks for listening to me tonight. I just wanted to provide a little bit of an update on what's happening on Vancouver Avenue.
Mr. Gorfie,
and
please.
I know it's going to be very short.
It's a question.
Yeah. Bike
It's a
patrol has
question
been
period.
put in place. Paladin Security has come in there. The lattice is put on the fence. We're still having people collecting on the north end of that building at night, jumping over the fence. Over the last week, I've watched one individual go over that fence several times, come out. First time I saw him with a deck of heroin in his hand, walking down the street. The next night I saw him actually taking that heroin, opening it up and snorting it. So the question is,
please.
With all of these things that is happening, the criminal activity that is taking place in the neighborhood, police resources are down. They're not effective. So what other measures can the city do to alleviate the problems? Because some of these problems, we know there's drug dealers on that property. We can simply engage with the owners of the property and the...
Mr. Gorfie, you've asked a question. I think your question is what can the city do? Councillor Armstrong.
I don't know if the city can do a lot, but one thing that you can do, which I've been suggesting to a lot of people, is start a court watch, because I think a lot of the frustration is not necessarily even deemed towards the police, it's the sentencing. And I think the other issue that is a lot of, and you would know this better than I, working years in dope, it's drug addiction. And these people need treatment and they need help. So maybe one of the things you can do is along with us, is we need to start advocating for treatment and detox. We have to do that, and we also have to be prepared for our taxes to go up for that, and I myself am, because if it's a way to help it. Another thing that maybe we can do is advocate for if you are an addict, perhaps your drugs are provided by a doctor, and then you start into the health system, and then it gets you out of the criminal world. Because I think the majority of the issues that we're dealing with is people that are desperate to get that fix, that don't have money, so they have to resort to whatever way they can, and you would know that from your background. So those are things that we need to work with the higher levels of government And that takes a community movement to start doing that, because as a city council, we can only control like services, basically. Like it's the next level of government I believe you should be looking at. And the court watch thing, I think when we used to have it, it was very effective.
Do you not think there's more effective ways of engaging more directly? They are our taxpayers' dollars are paying for this.
Maybe you and I could have a conversation later at another date to take it out of this, because I would love to hear some more ideas around it, but I don't want to enter into a debate, which I think would happen. Okay. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but this printing is worse than my printing. It's Karen, it looks like KWWINCC, and that can't be it.
I think she left.
All right, thank you. Janet Ismail?
Hello.
Evening.
I have a couple-part question, and I live behind Country Club, so I'm close to the Labio, so I'm directly affected. So forgive me, I haven't been sleeping much in the last few days, up every night, so if it's not very eloquent, that could be why. So first question, just was mentioned on the providing the, is that possible even to provide the housing, the residents, their substance of that they need of choice, let's say, so that it doesn't push on the community? Because right now it's very clear that they have to find a way to get that, and that's currently, and that's part of the concern by us as a community, that it's getting pushed on, is that it's our goods. So we're paying directly out of our stolen goods, and my neighbor's stolen vehicle, and we're out every night. So rather than having us provide it, is that possible? And I don't know. It's just a question, so if I'm really off base, please forgive me. I truly don't know. It's just been on my mind. It seems logical, because right now the upset from the community is that it's pushing on to us.
There are facilities that provide methadone, for instance, to certified addicts and safe injection sites. And that is certainly, I can only speak for myself on this in response to you. I think we're way past the time when prohibition has had any significant success, and those kinds of facilities are probably the appropriate way to deal with it, as much as it's offensive to people who have jobs and pay their taxes and never break the law and all of those things, but that is probably a solution that society is, I would say, stumbling towards over time. You have another question.
Yeah, so I guess the city wouldn't have any, because it's Pacifica and BC Housing, any influence or jurisdiction on that, right?
No.
Okay, the shopping carts that are used to transport said goods in that area, and I think it's very clear. Is there anything can be done on the transportation? I don't know what can be done for the shopping carts, because the shopping carts are the vehicle being used for the stolen goods, right? Is there anything the city can do on a bylaw about shopping carts?
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship. Am I on? Okay, thank you, Worship. I'm probably the only person in this place who picks up shopping carts and takes them back to the grocery stores. I have a truck, so I can do it. So I just drive around every once in a while and I load them on the truck. The things I take out of these shopping carts, the last one, it had 4 rocks, a garbage bag, which had just garbage in it, and it had a plastic fender off of a bike, and it had the spring that you close side doors with, storm doors. And that's what I took out of the shopping cart. There weren't any stolen items or anything like that. We have people who are homeless because they're not making rational decisions. And to put them in a place and expect them to start making rational decisions is just not going to happen until they get the help that they need. I don't believe that these shopping carts are used for that. I've never seen someone walk around with it, and when I'm at the bus stop and somebody pushes his cart up there, takes his plastic bag and gets on the bus, it isn't stolen. This isn't stolen property. So I just caution everybody that says, these are people who need help, right? And we as citizens should do the things that we can do to help. And I'm doing my little thing. I'm picking up the grocery cart, taking them back, right? So let's and one of the persons asked earlier, what can they do? What can we do? We have a homeless strategy to end homelessness in Nanaimo, and I would encourage all of our citizens to read it and then say, what can I do to help make this thing happen? Because that's how we will solve this problem. And we won't legislate it out of existence. We won't police it out of existence. We will solve it by solving our homeless issues, and that's what we should be doing.
Councillor Martman.
Thank you. I just had to share this. I, for one, am a person that enjoys learning about and speaking to homeless people and finding out their stories. And one person did tell me, to you it's a shopping cart. To him, it was his mobile workstation.
Thank you, and I hear that because we had our homeless, and that's why I went to the community forum to speak on behalf of the homelessness in our actual community before Labio came in, because I was concerned for our homeless. And they were using a shopping cart, and he had it all sorted out, as with the others. We lost our homeless. They weren't safe in the neighborhood, so we have lost all our homeless. This is a difference. This is completely night and day. And I feel like we are supporting homeless in a different way. I would support, and we would leave out stuff for our homeless. Before, we were a community. We lost that. And if you talk to anybody, even up there, they would know it. We talk about how we lost our true homeless when this came in. So it is heartfelt, because they were like a family. We left stuff out for them. So I just want to share that this isn't cold. We had our homeless, and they were part of our community, and we lost them, and that's sad, because we don't know if they're okay. They're out there.
I appreciate.
And so another question, one last question. The site was temporary, 2 to 5 years, and I know the city, it was mentioned in community forum, and I'm wondering if there's any updates on other sites that were being looked at by the city.
Mr. Lindsay.
Your Worship, the identification of sites would involve both the city and BC Housing long-term, but at this point, no, there's not been any sites that have been identified.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sandra Stewart, looks like Kobioka. Forgive me if I've mispronounced.
No, that's fine.
I couldn't quite make out the last.
Good evening. I'm a property manager here in Nanaimo. I've been here for 16 years. I've managed the same properties for 16 years. I have a property that is a half a block up from 250, and I also have a couple properties that are very close, one on Rock City Road and another one that's close on the other side of the Lapio site. Now, we have experienced crime, there's no doubt about it, but you know, the neighborhood is also concerned about the homeless issue. About the way it came about, not so crazy about, but everybody wants to do their part. Now, my question to you, as a taxpayer, the crime has been so unprecedented that it's coming right at source from the people's pockets. Things are being stolen, it's devastating. So as a taxpayer, I don't think that we should also be expected to pay to have the police there constantly when our funds could be allocated to more affordable housing. So it's a cycle. Now, I get that you are trying to keep the communication open and good friendly neighbors with the providers and the operators of the property, and you want your funding. We want the funding. But the fact of the matter is that when I agree with Councillor Armstrong, you're taking away a resource that could be better used elsewhere. I don't know how you're going to address it. I would love to see,
you do have
but
a
I don't
question.
think that as a taxpayer that we want to pay the money to have that. Now, I'm not saying calling it a nuisance property.
You do have a question.
Yes, my question
Please.
is, how are you going to address that expediently? And why do we have to pay for it out of the taxpayer's dollar? Seriously, we're already getting hit at the ground level, and now we're getting this. So my question is, how do you address it? How do you address it where the taxpayer is happy and everybody is? How do you do that?
I think I can respond this way. We're responsible for policing. We pay for 95% of the policing costs. 90% of policing costs in the city. So it's city taxpayers pay for that. We don't pay for health care except for the indirect contribution to capital, 40%, the regional district, regional hospital board. We don't pay for social workers. We don't pay for detox. We don't pay for all of those things. Those are provincial. And in some cases supported by federal responsibilities. They're not things over which we have control. I appreciate that we're the focus as city councillors of the concerns of the neighbours and the people who live in those neighbourhoods. And I don't want to try and give some constitutional 101 exercise lesson here tonight. But I keep emphasizing, and maybe no one's listening to me if people think I'm not listening to them, we don't have jurisdiction over these things. We don't have the tax base and we don't have the revenues. We can do what we can to cooperate with the various levels of government. But all of the things you've raised and how those funds are allocated are not something over which this council has any control or jurisdiction.
You have control over the policing, and you don't have control over that? So can't we make them responsible? I know you want to have a good neighbor thing with the providers. But who is going to go in and tell them, okay, enough is enough, you have to get it together? Who's going to do that? I mean, I get it from you guys that I don't feel like you're getting, like that you're going to go in and do that. I don't think you want to take the hard line with them because you're worried.
I'm going to assume that's your question indirectly, and I think you heard from Mr. Rudolph tonight an outline of the kind of contact that has taken place between city staff and the parties involved. Mr. Lindsay has been working very hard on this file for, well, it's getting on to a very long time, having had to deal with Tent City, Chief Fry. This has not been something that has been ignored, but again, I come back to how much we can possibly manage or do given our jurisdiction, given our tax base, given our authority, given our staff, and given what are other levels of government's responsibility.
So do you have some kind of, how do we address that? How long can we expect this to go on? What if it continues?
Might I suggest strongly, it seems to me that many people are writing to the city about this, but I don't see a lot of you corresponding with the provincial government or the federal government. Well, with great respect, I can only comment on the emails that come across my desk.
I have one more question about that, about this.
A question.
Okay, just a little bit of preamble. I have a question for you, Councillor Martman. You mentioned before that, somebody who's 10 years old doesn't grow up to be a drug dealer, okay? Or doesn't grow up to have these social problems. Of course they don't. But to understand the gravity of where we are, I actually sent the mayor a letter, and I said that I watched someone from 250 defecate on the side of the street in the middle of the daytime in front of somebody who was 10 years old. So the person who's 10 years old, how does that impact him? I don't understand that. So how do we address that? Okay, and I saw it. So I'm just going to go there. It's not the question, but the question is, how do we address that? I think that we need some kind of resolve with regards to the problems that we're facing. And I'm sorry, that's what I have to say. Okay? Thank you.
Amanda Oram on 10D, cannabis rezoning.
Mayor and council and staff, Amanda Oram, your neighborhood cannabis activist, changing it up a little bit. It's pretty amazing to be able to come and talk to our municipal government about cannabis. prohibition is over, yay. This is one of our first CRSs facing rezoning. People love shops, right? Like, it's like an experience, like people.
Ms. Oram,
right?
this is a question
It
period.
is, okay?
Please.
There's a reason. It is a shopping, people love shopping at the cannabis dispensaries, like I was saying. Is there any way to list all the 13 pending shops that our CAO list said who are in the queue and show its future rezoning and public hearing dates?
It was in a previous council agenda, actually. It listed all 13 that had their applications in.
All 13? Does it have like, because I see the signs.
No, it was
Mr.
all-
Lindsay, I
But there's no dates on
sense
them.
that you have an answer for this.
There's a couple of ways. So we have a what's building in our neighborhood portal on our website where people can look at all active applications in the city. So in terms of the dates, you'll confirm at that point is that we have an application. We do not have formal dates for the remainder applications to come forward to council, which is the first step, and only after they come to council are they scheduled for a public hearing. So we don't have those dates yet. We can just confirm the applications.
Do you have any like sort of estimate ETA on like a third reading coming back to council?
On the item that was here tonight, so that bylaw will be forwarded to public hearing on February the 7th. Council could consider consideration of third reading at that time, and then there would be conditions that would need to be met before it came back for final. So it could be a number of weeks, excuse me, a number of weeks after that before it came back for final adoption.
Okay.
And do keep in mind, as was pointed out in the remarks of Mr. Lindsay earlier, it will be dependent on a provincial license being granted.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Laura Bonner, nuisance properties. I don't think the conflict rules apply in a situation like this when it's question period.
Depends on the question. Thank you very much for hearing me tonight. This is my first time ever up here, and I have two questions, but they're only going to be questions because we've already gone through it all.
Thank you.
What are the rules that govern these two units? And do they, because rumor had it, that they have a one-strike rule? If that is true, then we don't need the nuisance property. One strike, they're out.
I'm looking at staff. I will attempt to answer this, and Mr. Lindsay will correct me, and I'm always happy to be corrected, or Mr. Rudolph. The rules are established in conjunction with BC Housing and the service providers on both sites, Island Crisis Care Society and Pacifica Housing. Many facilities like this or supportive housing units have one-strike rules potentially. I can't tell you chapter and verse what the exact rules are at either of these facilities. Mr. Lindsay, do you wish to add anything to that?
No, Your Worship, I think the important point, it's an agreement that's signed between the occupants and the provider. I've read them, but I don't believe it says specifically one strike. It speaks more in general terms about appropriate behavior within the facilities and in the surrounding community. And ultimately, it would be up to the service provider to determine when the agreement had been violated.
Okay. The second one is, when you're gathering all your information for the report that you want to bring, if the issues that we are having aren't big enough monetary-wise for the police even to bother doing a report on them, how are we going to get the proper information?
Can I answer that? I think that's where, I said it last time, you have to call the police every single time. They may not come out, but there is a record. So you have to do it, and I know I talked to Mr. Harris, who says that he could call the police 10 times a day, but he's not because he doesn't want to take up his staff time or whatever. But if you don't do it, there's no record, so it's like it didn't exist. So you have to call.
Okay, may I expand on that a bit? If it's been put out in a report that the crime level in our area has gone down in the last month, but we know it hasn't, That's the issue I'm concerned about.
If you're using the crime map, that's not up to date, number one.
Heck no.
Yeah, no, it's not up to date. They're working on that. Number two, it only reports thefts and property. It doesn't report assaults. Well, like it doesn't. So you have to be really careful when you're dealing with the stats. But you'll hear people say they called police and they didn't, or people can't be bothered. Like I hear that a lot, and I want to, if it's all right, Mr. Mayor, just to beg your indulgence here. When I made a comment about people concerned about police actions, that they should file a complaint, that wasn't my intent. My intent was, if you're not happy with what the police have done, talk to the officer first, then talk to the supervisor. And a lot of times you may find out the reason why they didn't act, because I think a lot of what we're hearing, and other councillors may have different things, a lot of it's frustration with the court system, that the same people are getting out and out again, and the police are saying, well, there's no point because they're being let out. Or the other thing that sometimes comes in is, yes, we'll know somebody did it, but we don't have what's called the elements of the offense to actually prove it. So that's something that we have to work with. Like, I mean, you can say, well, I think he did, but that's not enough unless you actually saw the person do the crime. That's not enough evidence. So I think it's a learning curve for everybody.
Okay.
But they do have to report it, because if you don't report, it didn't exist.
Right, but even if it is reported, but it doesn't hit the stats, I want to make sure that you guys have all the information that you're going to present. That's all. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Chrissy Forsyth. Good evening.
I work on Wesley Street. I've been working on Wesley Street for over 20 years. I own a house in the Rock City area as well. And obviously we all know that it's definitely a different atmosphere in Nanaimo now. So I was wondering if any of you have approached the province about opening any clinics for intravenous drug users to get supplied. So they have it in Vancouver, the Crosstown Clinic. It opened up in 2014, and there's over 300 people that are registered there now, and their crime rate has dropped a lot. It has dropped tons. People aren't out stealing, they're not out prostituting, they're not overdosing. It's huge. And they have 3 different clinics open now, and I really think that Nanaimo really needs to address something like this. We already have an illegally run safe injection site running on Wesley Street. Why not try something different? We need to do something different here. We have 300 people that all leave their needles laying around. It's bad.
Thank you for the question. I'm looking around the council table. I'm not aware of anyone who's made a personal request, but, pardon me?
Go to Dr. Hasselbeck. That's the place it has to go. It has to come from VHOF.
Yeah, none of you guys can approach any of them?
It has to come from VHOF because I believe they're actually illegal.
Okay.
But they're being run under the auspice, I think it's under a special thing under the Canada Health Act.
Okay.
Councillor Gesselbrock.
Yeah, just to answer your question there as well, thanks for bringing that forward. And I think we are recognizing that a lot of the issues that are stressing us out are because there's a lack of resources around detox, rehabilitation, and also our drug laws may not make sense in actually how to manage the criminality associated with people that are forced in a situation where they have to steal to deal with their illness. And it's my hope that the city, in staying within its jurisdiction, what it can actually do, can proactively take an advocating role in having these conversations and being open to experimenting and try different ways to actually find solutions that work. And I think everybody at this table is open to pushing to find a solution on this. And I think that right now it is a really important time with the by-election that we do need to get together and speak loudly for what the needs of the community are to the province and also to candidates that may be running representing Nanaimo. And so I hope that the effort that's expressed here tonight and the sincere intention to find solutions is utilized and focused where we might be able to make some advancements in the short term. So thank you.
Okay, appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Mr. Wagar, isn't what the Bible says, the last shall be first? You were first of the delegations tonight and the last
Thanks.
question.
Thank you very much. Thanks for voting that down, by the way. Two questions, if I may. First off, do you have any plans, or if you don't have any plans, do you have any intention to create plans to work or develop some sort of working relationship that's a bit more close to the service providers? For instance, they both have community they both have community advisory committees that engage with police and various EMT personnel, the healthcare workers, and the public. It occurs to me that perhaps you could send a staff member, or perhaps one of yourselves could attend some of these meetings.
Mr. Wagar, we can answer that question fairly readily. Mr. Rudolph?
Yes, Your Worship, we actually have a staff person that co-chairs the Social Planning Advisory Committee, so we are, that's John Horn. Just in fairness to council, they've been elected, they've had budget, they've had orientation, and they've had 2 weeks since Christmas. So they really need time to get their head around on many of these big issues, and we're doing our best to get all this stuff in front of council in a holistic way. I think your point's well taken. Staff have been brainstorming ourselves about how to bring all the service providers together to have that conversation and to work collaboratively to move forward to implement the homeless strategy and that type of thing. So this is a long-term project, and it's one I think that's already on our radar, and I think council will be appreciative of the information that we're being able to provide them in a not too distant future.
Thank you very much. Okay, so I'll just skip right ahead to my next question. I can think of a bunch of comments I could make. This report that's coming up in a week or two, this comprehensive report that Mr. Rudolph mentioned earlier, it sort of slipped past me exactly what it was. Is it possible to have that elaborated on a bit? Like, what is that report? What kind of information will it be giving you? And will it be the type of information that Councillor Armstrong was asking for?
Certainly. Mr. Rudolph.
Staff are going to be reporting to council on the subject of homelessness and housing in the broadest sense. So there's a large set of information on that. Secondly, what this particular motion was intended to do was to focus on the 2 temporary housing sites and provide a comprehensive set of information about the players that are involved, the folks that are working hard to make those sites work well as they can, given the tools that they have, knowing that they have difficult populations, provide useful and meaningful, comfortable information from the police department without revealing what the policing plans are for the neighborhood, because that wouldn't really be helpful, other than to suggest that the policing department has made it very clear to me they've heard loud and clear from the affected neighborhoods that they are taking it serious, and that's why they're deploying resources in this location, with the full expectation that over the course of time, the need for that will dissipate. It's not a sustainable level of attention, and it's not expected that it will be required. As the tenants in these, or the occupants of these modular units become acclimatized to their facility, the operators acclimatize with the occupants and the facilities, and the effectiveness of the program is starting to be observed. So I think we'll be able to furnish just some statistical information, but also a sense of the level of work that's going on, and hopefully we will have the support and input from the service providers, if not to participate in that meeting, but certainly to participate in our workshop. So I think there's a multifaceted set of reports that are going to come forward. One specific on the neighborhoods in these 2 locations. Secondly, we're in for the long haul in the subject matter, and I think we need to start looking at the big picture and how can we deal with a number of the questions that are here tonight, because they're fundamental, and what's our role in that.
Thank you. I get the impression that there's a huge amount of work ahead for all of us if we want to help our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That concludes questions. Please, Mr. Wagar, we're going to observe the rules. No comments. Excuse me. Question period having concluded, a motion for adjournment would be appropriate. Councillor Brown, seconded Councillor Bonner.
We're all getting it.
All those in favor? Motion carried. Thank you very much, everyone, for attending tonight.